Chapter 799. Yin Yang did not retort, argue, or explain. He just kept quiet. Yin Xiaoyao paced around angrily and said angrily, "You want to go by yourself? That's impossible. At least I'll go with you." "No way." Yin Yang was shocked, immediately breaking his silence to speak. Yin Xiaoyao was going with him? What a joke. Facing the Four Seasons Tower's full force, this was no different from sending himself to die. "Someone has to collect your corpse." Yin Xiaoyao glared at him angrily. "You don't want to die without a corpse, do you?" Yin Yang sucked in a deep breath and said, "I won't die. I'm confident." "I'm confident as well," Yin Xiaoyao bellowed. Both of them stopped talking, remaining silent for a long time. After a long time, Yin Yang said, "I'm leaving." Yin Xiaoyao snorted but did not speak. When Yin Yang walked to the window, Yin Xiaoyao's low, raspy voice came from behind him. "All these years, I've been thinking how great it would be if you were really my son. Why aren't you my biological son?" Yin Yang jolted, stunned on the spot. "I've truly treated you as my biological son." Yin Xiaoyao's voice was a little weak as he said, "I just don't know if there was a moment when you really thought of me as your father." Yin Yang did not speak for a long time. Yin Xiaoyao waited for a long time without a sound, thinking that Yin Yang had left. He sighed softly, his voice bleak. He felt that his state of mind had aged a lot. He murmured, "No matter what, don't die. I don't want to collect your corpse." However, the moment he turned around, he was immediately stunned. Yin Yang was standing in front of him. He had not left. Yin Yang's eyes were shining. Yin Xiaoyao looked at his nominal son, somewhat at a loss for what to do. "Actually, in my heart, you have always been my father. What you've done for me these few years has been more than many biological fathers, more dedicated." Yin Yang's voice was low, but his words were clear and sincere. Yin Xiaoyao's eyes shone brightly. "For me, you didn't hesitate to drift outside alone for several years. For me, you didn't hesitate to hide it from the emperor. For me." Yin Yang smiled bitterly. "I actually want to be your son for real. But that will only harm you. But in my heart, you will always be my father. You were, you are now, you will always be, and you will always be. Even if I find my biological father in the future, I'll tell him that I already had a father before him, a father who treated me sincerely, loved me, and cared for me." Yin Yang said softly, "If I can't find him, I still have you. I'm not destined to be alone in this lifetime." Yin Xiaoyao could only feel a rumbling in his head, his vision blurring. At this moment, he only felt that everything he had done before, everything he had sacrificed, was all worth it, far more than worth it. It was really worth it. In her haze, she seemed to see Yin Yang kneeling in front of her and kowtowing 3 times respectfully. He wanted to say something, to respond, but he could only feel his lips trembling, unable to speak. Then, he watched Yin Yang stand up in a daze and said, "I'm leaving." Then, he took 2 steps back, and his whole body suddenly disappeared without a trace. Yin Xiaoyao trembled, instinctively taking 2 steps back. Suddenly, he plopped down on the chair, not making a sound for a long time. Tears fell from his eyes, but a sincere smile hung at the corners of his lips. He could understand every word that Yin Yang said, so he was comforted by it. Happy, excited. "In front of outsiders, I can only be your father in name. In front of the emperor, I can only be your adoptive father, a shield that you can use. But only between you and me, we are true father and son. Enough, enough." The tower to heaven in. The 4 noble young masters were conflicted. They were now contemplating a very serious life topic. What was their ultimate goal in life? A life of popinjay? A carefree life? To become strong and roam the martial world? To be a high official and rich salary, to rule the world? To have beautiful wives and concubines, to have endless luck with women? It was an unusually serious topic. The answers to the above questions were mostly out of reach, only occasionally thought of when they were bored out of their minds. However, this question was suddenly brought before their eyes today, at this very moment. The four of them were at a loss of what to do, their thoughts unusually chaotic. Yin-Yang could not help but sigh inwardly. His original intention was only to ask what the four of them planned to do in the future. They had known each other for a while, the four of them had called him Big Brother and had even contributed greatly to him in many matters. If it was appropriate, he did not mind leaving some resources for them so that he could meet them again in the bound of universe one day. He had not let down their acquaintance and familiarity during this period of time. However, looking at the four men's expressions now, Yin-Yang understood a lot more. We don't know what to say at the moment. Dong Tianling broke the silence and said with a bitter chuckle, initially, we had thought of working as hard as we could to follow Boss Yun and make a name for ourselves in this world. We wouldn't have wasted our lives and left a legend behind. Wouldn't that be great? However, we really didn't expect Boss's footsteps to be so big and fast. In the end, the only thing we felt was that we were at a loss and it was hard to imagine. Boss, you're asking us about the future now. We don't know what our future will be like. At least, our original intention is no longer realistic. Dong Tianling was rarely so serious, but this time, he had truly dissected his inner thoughts, his voice heavy. To put it bluntly, we're still popinjays in our bones. We've never lacked wealth and glory since we were born. Conversely, we don't have the ability to enter the imperial court and become officials. For the same reason, we won't have a share in inheriting the family. As for the boundless fortune of wives and concubines, it's still based on our birth. We don't need any effort to obtain them. If it's too easy, it'll be tasteless. As for becoming strong, roaming the martial world, being unrivaled in this world, or even going to another world to reign supreme, we've thought about these ambitions very seriously before. However, we've asked ourselves, we can't bear the hardships. This is also the truth. Dong Tianling chuckled bitterly. We've been pampered since we were young and we've lived comfortably for so many years. Now, it's still possible for us to struggle, but the path of cultivation is long. In the long run, we'll never have that kind of ambition. Chen Wanfeng sighed. It's difficult. Chapter 800. Qiu Yunsan said, during this period of time, we've received plenty of benefits from Boss. Everything else aside, just the fact that we've been able to use all sorts of treasures to elevate our cultivation base in a sacred cultivation ground like the Yun residence has allowed mediocre people like us to elevate to the Dao realm. That's already a great fortune. Looking back at our home, there are no Dao realm cultivators. Not to mention that each of us has gained a high-level mystical beast, increasing our abilities by another level. Now, once we return home, will be existences that no one can afford to offend or dare to provoke for the rest of our lives. Even if we don't wish to be in power, we're still existences that can rival the family head. We'll be free for the rest of our lives, without any worries. The four of them looked at Yin-Yang guiltily. We are already very satisfied with our current state. Yin-Yang nodded with a smile. I understand and even agree with it. So, now, all of you should return home. Dong Tianling said, although we don't have the ability to help Boss here, the few of us still want to see Boss defeat the Four Seasons Tower. Otherwise, we won't be able to rest easy. It'll be a lifetime's regret if we miss this battle of the century. There's nothing to see in this final battle. Yin-Yang said, if all of you force yourselves to stay, there'll only be a negative outcome. It's not a good thing for you, for us, for everyone. The four of them were stunned for a moment before realization dawned on them. Yin-Yang was right. If they stayed, Yin-Yang would have to worry more. If the Four Seasons Tower decided to do something to them, Yin-Yang would definitely not sit back and watch. Their good intentions would only cause Yin-Yang to be held back by them. Since they were destined to leave, why would they have to wait for an outcome? I wish all of you here, that you don't have to work so hard for the rest of your lives, Yin-Yang said with a warm smile. The four of them had said just now that they would probably be at the end of their rope if they wanted to fight with all their might. Despite the implicit meaning in their words, how could Yun Yang understand them? If there was a day when their families were destroyed and they were at the end of their rope, when their enemies were too powerful to fight, it would be the time to fight with all their might. That was why Yun Yang said, "I wish all of you that you don't have to work so hard for the rest of your lives. The four of you will always be my, Yun Yang's, brothers." Yun Yang smiled. "What I'm most gratified about is that all of you are truly self-aware. Even when you say that you don't know what you want, you've actually gotten what you want the most. You have it in your hands, and it won't leave you for even a moment. If fate wills it, goodbye." It was as if Yun Yang's silhouette had melted into the air, gradually disappearing. "Go back quickly." As soon as he finished speaking, Yun Yang's silhouette disappeared completely. Looking at the chair that Yun Yang had been sitting on, the four of them felt lost, as if they had lost their parents. "Even though I said it, I still feel bad about it. I feel like I've let my boss down." Dong Tianlong sighed. Chiu Yun-san said dejectedly, "Boss is the dragon of the 9 heavens, we're destined to be unable to keep up with him. In this life, to be able to have such an experience is enough to reflect on for 100 years. In the end, there are still traces of us in his legend." Chun Wanfeng chuckled bitterly. "Speaking of this, the three of us still have to thank Dong Tianlong. If it wasn't for him who managed to establish a relationship with Boss through some mischief, how would we have the chance to be friends with such a living legend? Every night, I dream about it, it feels unreal. Especially after Boss' identity as Supreme Cloud was exposed, I'm still in a daze, unable to believe it. Actually, I wanted to follow Boss." Dong Tianlong hung his head dejectedly and uttered a shocking statement. "It's not just you." The other three chuckled bitterly in unison. Chiu Yun-san said, "Although you say that you've seen through the ways of the world and are content with what you have, how can a man not have ambitions? Who doesn't want to stand at the pinnacle of the world, to experience the thrill of being lonely at the top? Who doesn't want to stand out and be invincible? Our family isn't too bad, but we're still content with our own corner. Compared to these legendary figures, what are we? However, we still need to have some self-awareness. We can't be too insensible." Chun Wanfeng chuckled self-deprecatingly. "Boss is a person who values relationships and loyalty. If we want to follow him, he'll definitely think of ways to fulfill our wishes. However, our speed of advancement, state of mind, and determination are too far behind Boss. If we force ourselves, we'll only be a burden to him. Using us as a hindrance to make Boss slow down as well, that'll be harming Boss. We'll be letting him down. Since Boss is destined to soar through the clouds, why do we have to be a burden? It'll only be a burden to us and ourselves." The four of them looked at each other and chuckled softly. "We can't do anything for Boss, but we can let him go into battle with a light burden. By then, we can tell our descendants that Tianquan's legend, Supreme Cloud, is your grandfather's brother. It's not necessarily a joy in life." Dong Tianlong stood up. "There's no time to think about the future now. Pack your things quickly and return to the family." He looked at the other three. "After I return, I'll cultivate in seclusion for a period of time before going out to train in the martial world. If I have the chance to go to the bound of universe in this lifetime, I'll try to meet Boss again. If I can't go in the end, then it's fate." The other three agreed. "That's right, that's right. That's right. Let's go." The four of them walked out of the room in a single file. A guard was standing by the door, saying, "When young Master Yun left just now, he left 4 rings for the 4 young masters." As he spoke, he handed over the 4 rings in his palm. The four of them took one each but felt a surge of emotions, not daring to open it. "Let's wait until we get home to see." Dong Tianlong kept the rings and said, "The things Boss left behind must be extraordinary. We mustn't cause trouble for Boss at this time." "That's right. Let's go." In the afternoon of the same day, the 4 noble young masters left Tiantang City's south gate quietly with their guards. They walked 500 miles and went in 4 different directions, quickly disappearing into the wilderness. No one noticed that the 4 of them had left. It was at this moment that a line of words formed by white clouds appeared in the sky above Tiantang City. Everyone's attention, was drawn to it. Mr. Nian, meet at Tianxian Cliff in 3 days. A line of words floated quietly in the sky. Sometimes it was dark clouds, sometimes it was white clouds, sometimes it was rosy clouds, and sometimes it was golden clouds. The signs of human intervention were obvious. After a while, the cloud character in the horizon gradually became even larger, becoming incomparably large. This type of change was extremely moving, and it had long attracted everyone's attention. The entire capital city was suddenly filled with thunderous cheers that shook the heavens and earth. Supreme Cloud. It's Lord Supreme Cloud. Lord Supreme Cloud is back. In the afternoon, when I was writing, I found Lady May's farewell concert and watched it. I was still heartbroken. When I saw her in her wedding gown walking up the stairs and the 2 doors in front of her opened, I clearly felt that that moment didn't belong to this world anymore. After I finished reading, I saw a line in the comments. A netizen asked, "Have you found him in the other world?" Tears streamed down my face. Chapter 801. Countless people rushed out of their homes and looked up at the sky, gazing at the word in the sky, their faces filled with reverence. Although the streets were crowded with countless people, the atmosphere of Tiantang City was unusually quiet. The citizens of Tiantang City were only looking at the sky with sincerity, looking at the traces left behind by the person they respected the most. There was no more clamor. Countless people's eyes were filled with tears, and they were all indescribably touched. This was Supreme Cloud. This was Supreme Cloud. The legend of this world had performed a miracle in front of them. It was truly a miracle. How could the ever-changing word in the sky be accomplished by a human? Many people recalled Supreme Cloud's popinjay behavior when he had restored his identity as Yin Yang. They could not help but feel amused and impressed. Young Master Yun was known to be a money grubber back then, accumulating wealth everywhere. However, it had long been proven by Yutang's officials that Yutang's many years of war had resulted in countless families of martyrs and injured soldiers receiving donations every year and every month. The source of this money was none other than Yin Yang, Supreme Cloud. The Board of War's Marshal Tai Zhang had also come forward to testify that it was not only the military expenses and injured soldiers, even his own wedding had been a gift of silver taels from Supreme Cloud. The 9 Heavens dictum had sent out a secret message. It was a complete name list, a thick stack of it. It was the name list of Supreme Cloud's secret donations over the years, as well as the astronomical amount of silver taels. A rough estimate showed that the number of people who had received Supreme Cloud's aid, directly or indirectly, was almost equal to the entire population of Yutang. What a shocking number. What a sky-high amount of wealth. Supreme Cloud had given it all away without leaving a single penny. Countless people were tearing up, their hearts almost bursting with excitement. This is our Supreme Cloud. Our God of Yutang. Now, this God of Yutang had finally shown himself, leaving his words in the sky. Although most people did not understand what it meant, they cheered instinctively. Countless injured soldiers and the widows of martyrs had tears streaming down their cheeks when they saw the word Supreme Cloud had left in the sky. It was gratitude that seeped deep into their bones. Respect for generations to come. Since the beginning of time, there has never been a person who has been revered by the people to such an extent. His Majesty exclaimed, "I have no qualms now, nor do I feel any jealousy. I am only glad that such a character is in Yutang after all." Ever since Supreme Cloud's words appeared, they had been hanging in the sky. It was getting more and more eye-catching. It was obvious to everyone that Lord Supreme Cloud was waiting for a reply. Everyone was waiting quietly. He watched quietly. Countless people covered their mouths with their hands. Tears flowed freely, but they stared unblinkingly at the words in the sky. It was his benefactor's handwriting, the traces of Lord Supreme Cloud. I might not be able to see it more than a few times in my life. This time, even if it's just a few words, I must see it clearly. He had to engrave it in his heart. He would never forget it for all eternity. Countless scholars took out their brushes and ink on the spot. Regardless of where they were, they immediately began to copy. An hour later, a clear voice came from nowhere, echoing throughout the entire Tiantang city. Lord Supreme Cloud, grudges and grudges are destined to never be resolved peacefully, no matter where they are. Since Lord Supreme Cloud has the intention to settle the score, why can't we settle it in Tiantang City? Countless people began to whisper to each other. Who is this person speaking? Who is he? What's his background? What grudge does he have with Lord Supreme Cloud? Does he have the right to do so? Shoo, don't you see Mr. Nian written in the sky? This person must be Mr. Nian. To be able to draw Lord Supreme Cloud's personal invitation, he must not be an ordinary person. He must have some background. F***ck, how can I not know about this little disagreement? I'm asking what grudge there is. This bastard dares to become enemies with Lord Supreme Cloud? He dares to challenge him right in front of his face. How dare he, how dare he? Well, let's see what happens next. Look. The words in the sky have changed. There's new content. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the words in the sky had turned into the color of dark clouds once again. It was like thick ink that was embedded in the sky, creating a heavy and oppressive atmosphere. Mr. Nian, the Four Seasons Tower is despicable and shameless. You've used all sorts of despicable means to set up layers of ambushes at Tianxian Cliff and cause the death of my 8 elder brothers. I dare not forget this grudge and hatred. Since I want to settle the grudge, of course, I have to do it at Tianxian Cliff. The Four Seasons Tower doesn't have the right to fight me in Tiantang City. His words were laced with resentment and a murderous aura that spanned 3,000 miles. There were more than 10 million people in Yutong who read the words, causing a commotion at once. It was as if a super bomb had been dropped in the crowd, shaking the earth and shaking the heavens. It was the Four Seasons Tower's men who killed the 9 Supremes? How dare they, how could they do such a thing? What is the Four Seasons Tower? Who dares to tell me? D*MN the Four Seasons Tower. The F***King Four Seasons Tower should be destroyed. Could this Nian be the Four Seasons Tower's leader? F***ck, he's obviously not a good person. What's wrong with his surname? Serves him right to be beaten into a sticky pulp by Lord Supreme Cloud. There were even people who cried out, Nian, why aren't you dead yet? Get out of Tiantang City. Four Seasons Tower, get out of Tiantang City. Go to hell. One person's cry was answered by 100 people. The 100 people's response was followed by the tens of thousands. In an instant, millions of people were shouting at the same time, Nian. Get out of Tiantang City. Four Seasons Tower, get out of Tiantang City. An eye for an eye. All of you from the Four Seasons Tower shall die a horrible death, die without a complete corpse. D*MN the Four Seasons Tower, you deserve to be sliced into pieces and your bones burned to ashes. Bastard Nian, how can you F***king still have the cheek to live in this world? Go to hell quickly and cleanly. Yin Yang's words had undoubtedly announced the real culprit who killed the 9 Supremes to the world. It had also put an end to all the Four Seasons Tower's schemes in Yutong. From this moment onwards, the Four Seasons Tower could hardly do anything in Yutong anymore. Unless they were never exposed, they would be like rats crossing the street. As long as Yutong's subjects and people were still alive, the opposition between them would never disappear. As powerful as Supreme Lord Springfrost was back then, there were still a few people who knew about his identity as a member of the Four Seasons Tower. What was more, what the Four Seasons Tower wanted was never imperial power but providence. Providence was something that could never be separated from the people's support. Chapter 802. What the Four Seasons Tower was facing now was disgust, the most extreme form of disgust. This was the most severe and irreversible fate backlash. The Four Seasons Tower's higher-ups would never wish to see such a scene. Faced with such a wave of resistance, the words millions of people, and the scolding of the masses, an ordinary person might have already broken down mentally. However, Mr. Nian let out a heavy snort. His snort was like a muffled thunder that shook everyone's hearts. Everyone felt their hearts tremble, and their faces involuntarily turned pale as they staggered. Everyone could not help but have a terrifying thought: who was this Mr. Nian? How could he be so domineering and terrifying? The final battle will take place at Tianxian Cliff. If you don't go, I won't show myself. You can continue and wait for the next chance for me to show myself. The words in the air were changing. I believe that the Four Seasons Tower doesn't have the ability to capture me. Do I need to show my confidence? I've been going back and forth in Tianjin City a few times this day. Even now, have you discovered where I am? Have you found any trace of me? Right now, I'm right here, but are you able to capture me? So what if you found out my true identity? Would I be so foolish as to come right under your noses and wait for you to attack me? As long as I don't appear, the Four Seasons Tower's plan will never come to fruition. Although the words in the air changed very quickly, it gave off a very leisurely feeling, even very carefree. Mr. Nian's elegant voice rang out again. The Four Seasons Tower's previous targets were good at hiding, but as long as a person's whereabouts were exposed and there was a weakness that could be targeted, they would no longer be invulnerable. There are many people you care about in Tianjin City and the residents of Yun. Do you not care about their lives? The words in the air changed again. Tianxian Cliff still has the blood of 8 of my brothers. What do you say? I'll give you 3 days to set up at Tianxian Cliff, just like the previous time. The words in the air stopped at this line and did not change after that. Mr. Nian said a few more words, threatening and intimidating, but there was no longer any response from the air. An hour later, the dark clouds that were embedded in the horizon slowly dispersed, and there were no longer any traces of ink. As the ink faded from the horizon, the whole of Tianjin City erupted into a frenzy of cursing. On this day, millions of Yutong citizens, both inside and outside of Tianjin City, were cursing the Four Seasons Tower in unison, without exception. The Four Seasons Tower's people were truly unlucky. All the female relatives in the family were greeted by tens of millions of people without exception. And it was a greeting over and over again. Filthy words and all kinds of malicious curses came one after another. The head of the Four Seasons Tower, Mr. Nian, was the target of everyone's attention. No one below the 19th generation of his ancestors was spared. There were no exceptions. No one was lucky enough to be scolded. The veins of the Four Seasons Tower's spies were throbbing as they listened. They were filled with indignation but had nowhere to vent it. Revenge? How could he take revenge? Tens of millions of people were scolding you. Who could you seek revenge from? If you killed them one by one, no matter how skilled you were, how could you kill so many heads? The Four Seasons Tower's people had even more terrifying guesses in their hearts. This was only the beginning. When the news spread, there would only be more people scolding them. By then, it could be hundreds of millions or even billions of people scolding them together. After all, the total number of Yutong citizens was considerable. And when that time comes, won't there be people scolding me everywhere, and people scolding me everywhere? How can I take revenge then? The Four Seasons Tower's people made the wisest choice at the first instance. All of them withdrew from Tianjin City, away from the clamor. Yes, away from the hustle and bustle, not even daring to stay in the faraway towns, but heading straight for Tianxian Cliff. This was because Yutong's people's vehement curses would continue from now on for a long, long time. Whether it was the officials in charge of relics or the common folk, whether it was in the morning, at noon, or at night, whether they were with others or alone, they scolded the Four Seasons Tower's people as beasts, calling them the Four Seasons Tower's people despicable. They even scolded their families. Even this was not enough to quench their hatred. Countless citizens made suggestions and memorials to the emperor while officials relayed targeted suggestions to the emperor. It would be Lunar New Year's Eve in the future, but the word Nian was too inauspicious. There would be no more Lunar New Year. It would be Lunar New Year instead. Yes, Lunar New Year. Even if it was Lunar New Year, there would be further discussion on how to celebrate it. Even if it was not Lunar New Year, Nian could not be forgiven. For example, Nian could be categorized as a devil, a ferocious ghost, or a disgusting monster. In Yutong's territory, Nian was more despicable than a rat no matter where it was. It was more disgusting than a maggot in a cesspool. It was even more disgusting than a dung beetle. Yes, this abominable, disgusting, and disgusting thing was Nian. From now on, this bastard must not be allowed to enter Tiantang City during Lunar New Year every year. Every family wanted to set off firecrackers to dazzle this disgusting thing, to frighten it, and to drive it away. His Majesty readily accepted the advice and immediately summoned the officials from the Board of Rites for a discussion. The matter of celebrating Lunar New Year was decided. From then on, be it 1,000 or 10,000 years, as long as Lunar New Year was celebrated, Nian must be chased away by the entire population. No, it was too cheap to chase it away only once a year. Every major festival, firecrackers would be set off to chase it away once more. Who would set off firecrackers without restraint when there was a joyous occasion? Such a disgusting thing could not be let in during a joyous occasion. It was probably a prophecy. This custom gradually became a tradition in Yutong and even the entire Tianxian in the future, passed down from generation to generation. The Four Seasons Tower's men had been chased away, so Yun Yang was even more unrestrained. He landed in the residence of Shangguan family of generals to see the two ladies. Shangguan Lingxiu and Ji Lingxi were overjoyed to see Yun Yang return, but they could not help but worry. After all, both of them were cultivators and knew very well how terrifying the Four Seasons Tower could be. Are you really going to Tianxian Cliff for the final battle with the Four Seasons Tower? Shangguan Lingxiu looked at Yun Yang anxiously, her beautiful eyes filled with worry. Yun Yang smiled. Of course I have to go, but the initiative is now in my hands. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Shangguan Lingxiu could not help but be worried. But, this is still too risky, Yun Yang said softly, there's still a great secret that I need to unravel. Instead of saying that this battle is to settle the past grudges, it's more like I'm going to unravel the doubts in my heart. Ji Lingxi walked over slowly and said resolutely, I'll go with you for this battle. The blood feud at Tianxian Cliff belongs to my eldest brother. You're not allowed to stop me. I'm going even if you do. Chapter 803. Ji Lingxi rolled her eyes and could not help blushing. Anticipation rose in her heart. If I can help him offset the damage by doing this, I'll be more than happy to do so. Shangguan Lingxiu knew about the red glow on Ji Lingxi, so the words came out of her mouth without hesitation. It was not just Shangguan Lingxiu, even Yun Yang, who had not planned to bring Ji Lingxi along, was moved by the suggestion and could not help considering the feasibility of it. You've battled with Mr. Nian for the whole day today. Rest and have a good meal first before we talk about the rest. Shangguan Lingxiu went to prepare the meal. Are you really confident? I want to hear the truth. Ji Lingxi looked at Yun Yang with an indescribable concern. Confidence. Yun Yang said, if it's just me, it's not very high. However, if I have your help, it will multiply. No problem. Just tell me how I can help you. Ji Lingxi was excited at once. She felt that she had finally been valued after her long and arduous cultivation. There was finally a place for her to put her skills to use. Ji Lingxi was genuinely happy that Yun Yang could say that he needed her help with this matter. Can I finally do something for him? Can I just stay behind him and be a nobody, never able to show my face? Although Ji Lingxi's current cultivation base was higher than Yun Yang's, no matter how Ji Lingxi pretended to be strong and suppressed him with sparring, she was still the weaker party deep down when they were together. She would often become the one being taken care of unknowingly. Even Ji Lingxi herself could not understand this. I'm very powerful, much more powerful than Yun Yang. Why do I need him to take care of me everywhere? Although Ji Lingxi was actually very happy about this kind of care. Yun Yang pulled her into the room. He took out 7 pieces of Eastern amethysts and said with a smile, I urgently need you to help me with something important now. That is to absorb all the energy within these in the fastest and safest way possible. What are these? Heaven and earth treasures? Energy crystals? Ji Lingxi was very curious. I don't know exactly what this thing is for now, but it's a rare good thing. Yin Yang said, you'll cultivate your cultivation method later. I'll assist from the side. When our mystical qi is fused to its fullest potential, we'll converge the 2 flows of inner energy to circulate in one cycle to increase our cultivation base to the maximum. We must improve our abilities further in these 2 days of buffer time. Then, let's go. Without hesitation, Yun Yang set up a simple illusory formation and arranged the 7 pieces of Eastern amethysts into the shape of the Big Dipper in the middle of the formation. Then, he ran a golden thread through it and placed the other end of the golden thread on his palm. This formed a small spirit gathering formation, which was connected by the golden thread. As long as it was activated by Xian Qi, it would be an excellent channel for the output of spirit Qi. Come. The 2 of them sat cross-legged facing each other, separated by the purple crystal. Yin Yang grabbed the golden thread with one hand and pressed Ji Lingxi's palm with the other. He said in a low voice, focus on cultivating the cultivation method you're cultivating. Use the mystical yin energy to stimulate the purple crystal's spiritual qi. Don't slack off, give it your all. Ji Lingxi did as she was told, slowly channeling her mystical qi. The moment her mystical qi came into contact with the purple crystal's spiritual qi evaporated with a soft hum. Almost at the same time, Yin Yang's endless divine arts mystical qi was activated as well. Using the golden thread as a medium, he guided the swirling purple crystal's spiritual qi into his meridians. It swiftly circulated through his meridians, limbs, and bones before it slowly flowed into Ji Lingxi's palm from his right palm. Ji Lingxi could only feel an unstoppable, dense, and boundless spiritual energy surging into her palm. Her meridians expanded abruptly as the abundant spiritual energy was quickly converted into a sea of spiritual qi that surged into her meridians like a great river. In the blink of an eye, the spiritual qi in her body was almost full. Ji Lingxi's mind worked quickly, accelerating the cultivation method that she was already cultivating at full speed. She directed the surging energy into her dantian and turned it into her own use, while the other passed through her left hand and redirected it to the next cycle. Yin Yang was doing the same thing as well. The 7 Eastern amethysts glowed brilliantly at the same time. While Ji Lingxi was shocked by the immense power of the 7 purple crystals, she was even more perplexed than before. Her cultivation method was no longer the Ji family's cultivation method that she had cultivated when she was born in the Ji family. It was a mystical cultivation method that she had inherited from her unreliable father. Not only was it powerful, its level was far above all the cultivation methods in this world. Even with Yun Yang's secret identity as Supreme Cloud, the cultivation method that he cultivated should still be within the realm of this world. It was impossible for it to be mentioned in the same breath as hers. However, the reality was that when her cultivation method and Yun Yang's cultivation method formed a huge cycle, there was not the slightest bit of disharmony. In fact, it was indescribably compatible. The speed at which they cultivated and absorbed spiritual qi had more than doubled out of nowhere. It was a remarkable sight indeed. As the spiritual qi continued to roar in their meridians, the rate of increase grew faster and faster. It was fast and steady, without any hint of disorder. It had only been an hour since the cultivation method had been cultivated, but the spiritual qi in her dantian was already close to saturation. She had to further compress it, or else it would be futile. Then, how did Yun Yang know that their cultivation methods could be operated in such a manner, complementing each other so seamlessly? She remembered that she had never told him about the characteristics of her cultivation method. This was just too incomprehensible, and even more difficult to believe. Spiritual chi washed over their bodies over and over again. Both of them felt that their strength was increasing bit by bit without any tricks. Gradually, the two of them entered into a state of cultivation where they forgot about everything else and themselves. Their hearts were free from distractions as they focused solely on improving themselves. Shangguan Lingxiu came to the door quietly but could only see the roaring spiritual qi in the room. She could not see the silhouettes of both of them. Although she was shocked by the commotion of their cultivation, she knew that she could not disturb them. She stared at them in a daze for a while before she finally sighed and quietly moved a chair to sit outside the door. She stared at the scenery outside, lost in thought. After a long, long time, Shangguan Lingxiu suddenly channeled all of her cultivation base into her fingers. She gripped the hilt of her sword and squeezed it hard. Releasing her grip, she looked at the faint handprint on the hilt and felt the pain in her fingers. She could not help but recall how Ji Lingxi had twisted the same sword in her hand into a dough twist without a sound a few days ago. Then, with a casual pinch of her fingers, the twisted sword turned into a pile of metal shards instantly. The difference is too great. The difference is too great. How can the difference be so great? Chapter 804. Shangguan Lingxiu mumbled to herself. What's the use even if we force ourselves to be together? To be a vase protected by him for the rest of my life? Even if he doesn't mind and I'm willing to give in, would that still be me, Shangguan Lingxiu? At the door, old Mistress Shangguan held her dragon-headed walking stick, her eyes filled with deep pity. She could not help but recall something. King Yun, your Yun Yang isn't young anymore. When this old one's son was his age, he was already the father of 2 children. As a father, why aren't you considering his marriage? Yun Yang is stubborn. I've never forced him, including marriage. What do you think of my Lingxiu, King Yun? It's rare that the two of them are in love. Isn't it a wonderful thing for our families to be in-laws? Marshal Qiu mentioned to this old one that he's willing to be the matchmaker. Old mistress, regarding Yun Yang, rather than saying that I've never forced him, it's more accurate to say that he's never bothered me. Everything about this child. I can't make decisions for him. Especially marriage, it has to depend on his own opinion. He. Looks like the Cloud King is not optimistic about this marriage. No. I'm happy to see it happen, even willing to facilitate it with all my might. However, Yin Yang still has to make the final decision himself. Marriage is the order of parents and the words of the matchmaker. This old one understands King Yun's intentions. I'll take my leave now. Old mistress, no need to send me off. The old mistress recalled the last time she came to Yun Xiaoyao to propose marriage. She had thought that if she were to disregard her own dignity and come forward, Yun Duanduan would not be able to reject her. He would definitely agree to it immediately and happily. What she did not expect was that Yun Xiaoyao's reaction was like this. Despite all his good words, it did not work out in the end. Old Mistress Shangguan left in a huff and viewed Yun Xiaoyao as an enemy from then on. Only now did she know. There was not a single lie in what Yun Xiaoyao had said at that time. It was true that he was happy to see the marriage happen and was willing to facilitate it, but it was even more true that he could not make the decision for Yun Yang. Supreme Cloud of the 9 Supremes. Supreme Cloud who dominated the world and the martial world. How could Yun Xiaoyao make the decision for Supreme Cloud? Especially marriage, such an important matter of one's life. Even His Majesty would not dare to make decisions for Supreme Cloud. Ever since she knew that Yun Yang was Supreme Cloud, old Mistress Shangguan's wisdom and experience allowed her to immediately guess that Yun Yang was not Yun Xiaoyao's biological son. Recalling Yun Xiaoyao's helpless expression, old Mistress Shangguan sighed. So, I have wronged Yun Xiaoyao at that time. My selfishness has gotten the better of me, old Mistress Shangguan murmured to herself. Now that Lingxiu and Yun Yang were together, it seemed that Lingxiu had fallen behind quite a bit. It was not in terms of family background, appearance, or temperament, it was only in terms of cultivation ability. However, the cultivation of strength was something that could not be achieved in a short period of time. Old Mistress Shangguan closed her eyes and sighed, mumbling, "It's time to let Lingxiu seek her own happiness. The Shangguan family of generals has really held her back for far too long." "Lingxiu," Old Mistress Shangguan called out softly. Shangguan Lingxiu lifted her head as if she had just woken up from a dream. She had been lost in her thoughts just now and did not realize that the old mistress was already in front of her. "Old Granny. What are you thinking about?" "Nothing." Shangguan Lingxiu smiled, looking as if she was doing very well. "It's good that you're fine. I just remembered that there's something important to do." "Come with me," Old Mistress Shangguan said. She turned to leave as soon as she finished speaking. Shangguan Lingxiu looked back worriedly and glanced at Feng Mafei and Bai Yixue, who were standing guard on both sides. Only then did she follow Old Mistress Shangguan, turning back repeatedly with every step. Shangguan Ancestral Hall. "Old Granny, why did you bring me here?" Shangguan Lingxiu asked in surprise, looking at the ancestral tablets. What important matter could there be here that was so urgent and urgent? "We, the Shangguan family, have a very special secret," Old Mistress Shangguan said in a low voice. This originated from the first ancestor of the Shangguan family. Back then, the first ancestor came across a heavily injured person who was on the verge of death. The first ancestor tried his best to save the person, but the person disappeared without a word of thanks after he recovered. The first ancestor's intention was to save the person, so he didn't mind if there was a word of thanks. However, a year later, another person came looking for him, saying to thank him for saving his life and that he could fulfill one of his wishes, even saying that it could be anything. However, the first ancestor's main purpose in life was to help those in danger. He really didn't have the intention to repay his kindness, so he rejected it directly. However, that person insisted on leaving 3 joss sticks, saying that if he had any requests in the future, he only needed to light the 3 joss sticks and someone would come to help. He also said that anything would be fine. If that was all, I'm afraid first ancestor wouldn't have placed this matter in his heart and forgotten about the 3 incense sticks. However, after that person handed over the 3 incense sticks, he waved his hand and moved the ancestral grave of Shangguan family. He said solemnly that from then on, the descendants of Shangguan family would all be invincible generals who won hundreds of battles and would be nobles for generations to come. Shangguan Lingxiu's scalp was already numb from the shock of the story when she heard this. Who was that person? How could he have such a remarkable ability? With a wave of his hand, he could move the ancestral graves and change the feng shui. It was already impressive to be able to be a nobleman for generations, yet he could even decide that the Shangguan family of generals would be passed down. It was a remarkable technique. What was more, a wish could be anything. This statement was a little too exaggerated. Only a legend could have such ability. After the person said this, he disappeared in front of the first ancestor. Only then did first ancestor come to a realization. He knew that he had met an unparalleled expert, so he naturally passed down the 3 sticks of incense from generation to generation. He even passed down the teachings of his ancestors. If the later generations have exceptional talents, they can rely on these 3 sticks of incense to achieve an unparalleled immortal fate. I don't know if it was a prophecy or the fate of the feng shui, but the Shangguan family has been a family of generals since then, being nobles for generations to come. It's really like what that person said. However, because this secret is too important, the 3 joss sticks have been passed down and have never been used, until today. Old Mistress Shangguan looked at Shangguan Lingxiu. Looking at you, I was suddenly enlightened. Can't these 3 joss sticks help you achieve your wish? Although your wish is difficult to achieve, it's still within the scope of anything. Shangguan Lingxiu was stunned. Achieve my wish? How should I put it? Deny it? How many people in the Shangguan family did not know of my wish? Chapter 805. Young Lady Lingxiu could not help blushing. She said bashfully, I didn't know there was such an anecdote, but it sounds really mysterious and hard to imagine. It's been more than a dozen generations since the rise of the Shangguan family in Yutong. Could it all originate from, your thinking is still too simple and naive. Old Mistress Shangguan sneered. The first ancestor I mentioned is the first-generation ancestor who established the Shangguan family of generals. Now, strictly speaking, you should be the 172nd descendant of the Shangguan family of generals. Your nephew, on the other hand, is the 173rd generation. Other than being a taboo and a cover, the so-called genealogy now only records the dozen or so generations of the family of generals since Yutong. 173 generations. Shangguan Lingxiu was dizzy from the number, unable to think straight. How long had it been since more than 100, almost 200 generations of heritage? Even if each generation only lasted for 30 years, would it not be more than 5,000 years, almost 6,000 years? Do you know why the Shangguan family of generals is revered by the world's warriors? The night sky is filled with stars. The Big Dipper is revered by the world's warriors. This saying doesn't only exist in Yutong's era. Previously, De Shang, De Zhou, De Zhao, De Qin. Throughout the rise and fall of countless empires, the people of the Shangguan family were all great generals of the country. It's just that as the dynasties rose and fell, the Shangguan family would lie dormant for a period of time. However, as long as the people of the Shangguan family appeared on the battlefield, they had never lost an inch of land. Being undefeatable and undefeatable is definitely not a legend that only appeared in the recent centuries. Among the 170-odd generations of the Shangguan family of generals, there are more than 400 imperial marshals. As for the generals, there are more than 1,000 of them. How can the Shangguan family of generals' heritage be as little as what you see? Old Mistress Shangguan's voice was bleak, but it was laced with an indescribable sense of pride. Shangguan Lingxiu was rendered speechless by the series of new understandings. All right, let's get back to the topic at hand. Old Mistress Shangguan said, I'm going to light these 3 incense sticks now. If you're unwilling, say it now. Why wouldn't I be? Shangguan Lingxiu was surprised. Because this opportunity is not ordinary. Once the incense is lit, it will not be extinguished. With the arrival of the immortals, your fate will change accordingly. In the future, perhaps you'll find that what you've been pursuing, what you've been chasing, has long been unable to catch up to you. At that time, perhaps there will be a new change in your heart. Old Mistress Shangguan looked at Shangguan Lingxiu lovingly. Therefore, I'm giving you the right to choose your own destiny. Shangguan Lingxiu said, Shangguan Lingxiu Shangguan bit her. What if I can't? Wouldn't it be a waste of this unparalleled immortal fate? Said, Master, Mistress said, doesn't matter about. Master, I too, in fact, wanted to light these 3 incense sticks since the first day received them. I think been patient enough to hold it in until now. Sigh, the burden of the Shangguan family has been on your shoulders for so many years. Now, thanks to you, Supreme Cloud has resolved the predicament and Zio's vengeance is about to be avenged. The family owes you too much. I don't think it's enough to compensate you with this. Shangguan Lingxiu said softly, I wish to know the cause and effect of the incident, everything. Old Mistress Shangguan was silent for a moment before saying, Come with me. There was a small door hidden in the corner of the ancestral hall where the Shangguan family of generals worshipped their ancestors. Shangguan Lingxiu had never seen it open before. Today, however, the door was opened before her. Shangguan Lingxiu would never have dreamt that such a small door could actually seal such a huge space. It was a huge space that could almost be called a warehouse. The old mistress walked over with her back straight, her eyes looking straight ahead as she said in a low voice, Here are all the biographies of our ancestors. As well as the weapons they used, the tools they cherished. Shangguan Lingxiu looked at everything before her like she was on a pilgrimage, her eyes welling up with tears. As she walked through the large warehouse, she felt as if countless gazes were looking at her with calm and kind gazes. They were the gazes of the ancestors. A table came into view when she reached the end. There was only a jade box on it. The old woman opened the jade box and picked up a book. Underneath the book, there was another small jade box. The old mistress opened the book and flipped to the back, stopping when she reached a certain page. There were a few lines of scribbled words. One day, on the way back to the army, there was a martial world feud. A plump man barged into the army in a panic. He was severely injured and unconscious, barely breathing. Feeling pity for him, I hid him and treated him. I later found out that his surname was Tang. His name was Tangifang. 7 days later, his injuries healed and he left after bidding farewell. After the new year, a lady came and said that she would fulfill a request of the Shangguan family, anything. She thought of it and recorded it solemnly. The words were clear. The matter had not been taken to heart at the time. It was only because someone had come to repay a debt of gratitude and because she knew that the person was not to be trifled with, that she recalled it and recorded it. The heavenly incense in the jade box can help the descendants of the Shangguan family to attain immortality. Remember this, future generations. The rest was exactly as old Mistress Shangguan had said. So it is. Shangguan Lingxiu could not help but be curious. Just what kind of person could possess such an unparalleled power? How dare he boast that any wish could be fulfilled, no matter what it was? Since you have no objections, I'll bring out these 3 incense sticks now. Old Madame Shangguan did things swiftly and decisively. She immediately took out the long jade box. The 3 incense sticks were sparkling and translucent like jade. They looked almost transparent. Upon closer inspection, one could see that the incense was slender and only the length of a palm. It was small and cute, its appearance alone made it stand out from ordinary incense. Old Mistress Shangguan took out a small incense burner and inserted the 3 incense sticks into it devoutly before lighting them up one by one carefully. In an instant, green smoke rose into the air. The grandfather and grandson duo were astonished to find that the green smoke was rising in a straight line, as straight as an iron wire. It spread all the way up, and the roof above them couldn't stop it at all. The green smoke pierced a hole through the roof. The 3 incense sticks that had been stored for thousands of years could actually pierce through the roof just by burning the smoke. The current situation was unimaginable and unbelievable. Chapter 806. The smoke rose straight up. Although it was still thin, it rose higher and higher. Within a breath's time, it had reached the sky, pierced through the clouds, and rose into the 9 heavens. What everyone did not know, what was even more unimaginable, was that after the smoke pierced through the clouds, the hidden fragrance in it began to spread. In an instant, an extremely rich fragrance suddenly spread out in the 9 heavens. It spread out in all directions. On a blue planet, next to a bright and beautiful lake, a white-clothed young man was fishing with a fishing rod. He vowed solemnly, "Look, I'm going to catch a dragon for you in this lake today without any extra tricks." Beside him, there were 7 or 8 extremely beautiful young girls. They were all leisurely minding their own business. Some were reading on deck chairs, some were resting on hammocks, some were playing barefoot by the water, and some were studying music with a flute. Only a young girl in white was smiling and sitting beside the young man in white. Another young girl rolled her eyes and said, "How can there be a dragon in such a small lake? Not to mention this lake, there are no dragons in the entire continent. Let's see how you're going to catch one. How you're going to bluff." "Bluff? Why do you think I'm bluffing? What if I really catch one?" "Shall we?" The young man in white said, "Do you want to make a bet?" The young girl was very confident. "How are you going to catch something that doesn't even exist?" "All right, let's make a bet. If you catch a dragon, we'll do whatever you say." The young man laughed evilly. He. "How about this, if you lose, you'll practice the 36 diagrams with me. How about that?" As soon as he said this, the few young girls beside him instantly blushed and pouted coquettishly. The first young girl was so embarrassed that her face almost bled. She stomped her feet and said, "You letcher. Let's make a bet." I've already checked this entire planet and there are no traces of dragons. If you lose, I'll punish you, not to touch me for 3 years. No, that's too easy on you. I'll punish you by barking like a dog 3 times. She wanted to say that she was not allowed to touch him for 3 years, but after thinking about it, she changed her mind. Her face turned even redder. Seeing the adorable young girl's expression, the surrounding young girls all burst into laughter. The youth in white was still full of confidence and said, "Good. It's a deal. Let's set the wager like that. Remember, if you're willing to bet, you must be willing to lose. Look. I've taken the bait. Let's see what it is." The girls all turned their heads and focused their attention on the surface of the water. Sure enough, they saw a big fish swimming underwater while pulling the fishing line. For the time being, he couldn't tell what kind of fish it was, or what else it was. The girls urged, "Quick, come out of the water and take a look, the stakes are revealed, the stakes are revealed." The hooked object was getting closer and closer to the surface of the water, and everyone could finally see it clearly. It turned out to be a big golden carp. Even though this fish wasn't small in size and was covered in golden scales, it was still not a dragon. This was something that everyone could see with their own eyes. The girl immediately became high-spirited and laughed loudly. "This is clearly a carp, you've lost. Ha ha ha, hurry up and bark like a dog." The youth said, "How is this a carp? Take a closer look." The girl turned her head in disbelief and heard the youth shout, "Carp leaping over the dragon gate, transform." With this shout, the carp on the hook actually transformed into a dragon in an instant. It was still golden in color, and it had 5 claws and 2 horns, swimming back and forth in the water. If it wasn't a golden dragon, what could it be? The girl was instantly exasperated. "You cheated. Using such a method to cheat, aren't you ashamed? Shameless." The youth said proudly, "In any case, you've lost. What I've hooked is really a dragon." Besides, the legend of the carp leaping over the dragon gate, the fish dragon transformation, this carp obtained an opportunity and transcended into a dragon. How is this cheating and shameless? The current situation is that the carp has leaped over something similar to the dragon gate. Do you understand? If you're willing to bet, you must be willing to lose. The result of this matter is already a foregone conclusion. Little girl, remember to wash yourself clean later, and wait for me to complete the bet tonight, he he he. The girl's face was flushed, and she stomped her feet in protest. All the girls laughed and scolded together. In an instant, it was extremely lively and noisy. At this moment, a faint fragrance wafted over. The graceful, beautiful, and peerless woman in white who had been sitting beside the youth frowned and calculated with her fingers. She smiled and said, my disciple is coming. I wonder if it's a coincidence or not." The youth in white asked curiously, "Your disciple? When did you obtain this opportunity?" The woman in white snorted and said, "Is the source of this opportunity still you? Back then, you asked me to save the direct descendant of the fatty. When I got there, I found that the kid had already been saved. However, the little fatty was so anxious to escape that he didn't repay the favor. So, I made a promise of 3 incense sticks, waiting for fate." The white-clothed youth scratched his head and thought for a while before saying, "So that's what happened. Oh, I remember now. That fatty isn't a human, he's as lazy as a pig. He didn't save his own offspring and instead turned around to trouble me. How could he be compared to that old opponent of mine? Justice is so straightforward. I remember now, I remember everything now. I haven't found trouble with him yet. If that's the case, you should go quickly." The youth in white said, "It's good that you're leaving tonight, he he he." He laughed evilly and thought, "No one will be able to control me if you leave. I can do whatever I want with that little girl tonight. Do you think it's that easy to get rid of my gambling debt? Do you think you're old black? Sister May, I'll go with you. I'll help you." The girl who lost the bet begged pitifully. "Help? What's there to help? It's only proper to admit defeat. The youth in white grabbed her in his arms and said to the woman in white, Go quickly, go quickly. Come back quickly. The woman in white smiled warmly and said, Shao Yi, I'll come back quickly. I'll come back to save you soon. Her body swayed and disappeared without a trace. You're all bullying me. The girl called Shao Yi stomped her feet and shouted. She was full of anger and bitterness. She turned her eyes and looked at the others. Sister, where are they? Where did they go? The 7 or 8 girls who were here just a moment ago had disappeared without anyone noticing. None of you have any sense of loyalty. The girls stomped her feet. He. The youth laughed. I say this is clearly an opportunity created for you by the sisters. You have to seize it. As he spoke, he suddenly froze and said, Oh no. I forgot to tell them something. He tilted his head and murmured, Forget it. It's not too late to take back the bet first. He picked up the girl and carried her on his shoulder. Ignoring the girl's violent struggles, he sang and walked away in high spirits. Come on, have fun. We have a lot of time anyway. Chapter 807. Shangguan Lingxiu and old Mistress Shangguan's expressions grew increasingly anxious. Watching the 3 joss sticks burn quietly, the grandmother and granddaughter thought in unison, the 3 joss sticks are burning calmly, elegantly, proudly, and untainted by the world. However, no matter how elegantly the joss sticks burned, the 2 people who were waiting were still in turmoil. Old Mistress Shangguan could not help but grow anxious as the 3 joss sticks burned to the bottom, but there was still no movement. What's going on? Why isn't there any reaction? The old mistress stared anxiously at the smoke in front of her, mumbling almost unconsciously, could it be fake? Once she thought of the possibility, she could no longer remain calm. The old mistress shuddered uncontrollably as she shivered uncontrollably. This was the Shangguan family's last trump card and its biggest secret. It was also the Shangguan family of general spiritual pillar that had supported them through countless difficult years. If this incense was fake, and it didn't exist, then wouldn't the Shangguan clan's several thousand years of careful protection of this incense become a huge joke? Old Mistress Shangguan knew that she would never be able to accept such an outcome. Shangguan Lingxiu, on the other hand, was more composed. Old mistress, don't be anxious. I believe this joss stick communication needs time as well. What do you mean by that? The old mistress murmured like she was grasping at a life-saving straw. Since the joss sticks need to be lit and there's a burning process, does that mean that the immortal needs some time to receive the message? In my opinion, since that immortal is so powerful, he is most likely a powerful existence that does not belong to our continent. No matter how miraculous the incense is, it is still a communication from this world to another world. It will definitely take a certain amount of time. Also, even if that immortal immediately set off after receiving the news, he will still need a certain amount of time to cross the distance between the 2 worlds. Since there are so many imaginable processes in between, how could he really rush over in such a short period of time? No matter how powerful the immortal is, it would be difficult for him to do so. Shangguan Lingxiu guessed, I'm guessing that being able to rush over in a day or 2 is already shocking enough. Asking for more would be asking for trouble. You're right. I'm too conflicted and my heart is unbalanced, old Mistress Shangguan mused, feeling her anxious emotions slowly calming down. Shangguan Lingxiu's analysis was obviously reasonable. It was a reality that could be seen through common sense, and it was an undeniable fact. Both of them calmed down once more and waited patiently for the unknown opportunity to arrive. It was at this moment that the grandfather and grandson heard a light laugh at the same time. It seemed to come from beyond the heavens. It seemed illusory, but at the same time, it seemed real and not fake. Just as the 2 of them were wondering if it was real or not, they saw the cigarette in front of them suddenly change. In a trance, a beautiful figure quietly appeared from the smoke. A lady dressed in white, as pretty as a painting, stood in front of them with a faint smile on her face. Old Mistress Shangguan had boasted that she was a rare beauty when she was young, while Shangguan Lingxiu was in her prime, the most beautiful age of her life. However, at this moment, the grandfather-granddaughter pair were both stunned the instant the peerless beauty entered their eyes. A self-deprecating thought rose in their minds at the same time: I can't believe there's such a beautiful woman in this world. I'm nothing compared to her. The lady in white before them could be described as peerless, beautiful, and devastatingly beautiful, but it was still far from enough. Using such words alone would be a blasphemy against the beauty before them. Such beauty did not belong to the mortal world at all. Even in the heavens, among the otherworldly immortals, she should be at the top of the list. She was indescribably beautiful. Just the transcendent charm of rolling her eyes, just the peerless elegance of a slight smile, just the graceful grace of a gentle standing was enough to make everyone in the world fall for her, even if they were to die 9 times without regret. The little girl's mind is very meticulous. The lady in white smiled gently and said, "Old mistress, is this the one the Shangguan family has chosen after so many years? Is your wish to make this girl a success?" Old mistress replied respectfully, "Immortal, please understand." The lady in white was all smiles as she looked at Shangguan Lingxiu from head to toe. She nodded and praised, not bad at all. In terms of temperament alone, you are the best of the best. Very much to my liking." She turned to look at old mistress and asked with a smile, "May I ask old mistress a question?" "Please ask, immortal," replied old mistress. The lady in white said faintly, "From what I know, the opportunity to make a descendant is usually given to boys in this world. Old mistress, however, has chosen your granddaughter. May I ask why?" The lady in white asked casually. However, old mistress dared not answer casually. Heavens had always been difficult to question. Since this lady was an immortal, she would have her reasons for every question she asked. Perhaps there was a deeper meaning behind it, perhaps it was another test. Even though she looked friendly and amiable, the aura of immortality that lingered around her, the unparalleled beauty that one dared not look directly at, and the indescribably powerful aura, all of it made one feel that she was incomparably noble and unapproachable. Old Mistress Shangguan pondered for a moment and said, "To be honest, immortal, I have my considerations for doing this. Firstly, this girl has sacrificed too much for the family. The family owes her too much, thus delaying her marriage. Now that she's finally found someone she likes, it's hard for her to achieve anything in martial arts because of the family's delay. She's also a prideful person, so she's not willing to be a burden to that person," the lady in white said noncommittally. "This can be considered a reason." You mentioned the first reason just now, so there must be a second reason?" "Yes," answered old Mistress Shangguan. "The second reason is, this old one's decision is also for the future of the Shangguan family." She kept quiet for a moment and said, "While boys are meant to carry on the family line and represent the family's direct line of descent, the boys of the Shangguan family have never been overly obsessed with martial arts. Instead, they're more interested in fighting and killing. That's why the boys of the Shangguan family of generals are fated to be unable to go far on the path of martial arts. Even if a boy with exceptional aptitude and a great sense of responsibility for the future of the family of generals goes to the immortal sect and is nurtured, the boys of the Shangguan family are born to be brave and ruthless. It's a natural habit and there's no exception. Think about the mortal world. The conflicts between people in the martial world are already chaotic. What's more when it comes to the path of immortality that goes against the natural order? The risk of dying along the way is too great." Chapter 808. If the child were to fall, it would mean that the Shangguan family would lose its greatest hope for nothing. On the other hand, no matter how strong a girl is, compared to a man, even if she has a weak side. Furthermore, a girl knows how to protect herself better. Also, a girl would be less ambitious than a boy. She would not forget her roots and would take care of her family more meticulously. With an immortal to serve as a deterrence from afar, I believe that the Shangguan family would not decline for thousands of years. This is the long-term plan. Old Mistress Shangguan hesitated as she spoke, feeling that all her thoughts could not be hidden from this immortal. It would not be good to hide anything. Finally, in one breath, he said all the words that were hidden in the deepest part of his mind. There's one more thing. With Lingxiu's pure heart and graceful appearance, if she can establish herself in the immortal Tao, the husband she finds in the future will definitely be an outstanding talent of his generation. If that's the case, the Shengguan family would only be sending one away, but there's a high chance that we would gain 2 or even more guardians. This is where my greatest selfishness lies. Old mistress smiled. This way, while fulfilling Lingxiu's own wish, we can also secure a prosperous future for the family. I think it's not a loss no matter what. The lady in white smiled warmly and said, Old mistress, your words speak of sincerity. Old mistress chuckled humorlessly. How would I dare to hide anything from you? The lady in white smiled and looked at Shengguan Lingxiu. Your name is Shengguan Lingxiu? Yes, Shengguan Lingxiu answered with a lowered brow. Born in the year of Bing Zi, I'm 23 years old this year. The lady in white said, what's rarer is the phoenix physique. Her meridians are unobstructed, and she has the quality of heavenly yin. Her body is perfect. Although her chakras are limited by this world and do not close themselves, it's only a temporary flaw that can be easily resolved. It's only a matter of course for her to progress 1,000 miles in the future. Not bad indeed. Old Mistress Shengguan and Old Mistress Shengguan were overwhelmed with shock. They had just met, and Old Mistress had not told her anything about Shengguan Lingxiu, but she was able to recite all of it as if she was familiar with it. There was not a single mistake in it. Are you willing to come with me? To be my disciple? The lady in white asked with a smile. Lingxiu is willing. The woman in white smiled and said, is there anything unfinished business before you leave? Shengguan Lingxiu blushed, her eyes reddening as well as she said, could you? Immortal, please give me some time. The woman in white said indifferently, I can only give you 4 hours at most. Shengguan Lingxiu was at a loss when she heard that, not knowing how to react for a moment. The woman in white said, I'm not being unreasonable. Firstly, this world's level is low, and it's hard for you to bear my ultimate heaven's power. 4 hours is already the limit. Secondly, since you've vowed to step on this heaven-defying path, then you have to learn to get used to everything from now on. The so-called pinnacle of martial arts has always been too high, too cold, and too lonely. Even if it's high, it's cold at the top. The lady in white sighed and took a good look at Shengguan Lingxiu, saying, although your destiny is extremely good, it is destined that you will not be able to participate in more of this world's turmoil. Shengguan Lingxiu sighed softly and said, this disciple understands. What do you understand? The lady in white asked. Shengguan Lingxiu said sorrowfully, once I start cultivating, time flies, the road is long, the stars are separated, I'm afraid, immortals and mortals are different, it has always been so. The lady in white said. The old mistress said softly, I'll leave Lingxiu to you in the future. I'm old, I'm afraid I won't be able to wait for her return, everything will. Her voice choked as she spoke. The lady in white said softly, don't worry, old mistress. I'll take good care of Lingxiu once she's my disciple. As long as she cultivates diligently, I can guarantee that her life will be smooth and her wishes will come true. No one will dare provoke her in the entire universe. It's only a matter of time before no one dares to bully her as she roams the universe. She smiled proudly. Even the 10 brothers who roam the universe without a care in the world, will have to think twice if they want to bully my disciple. Most of them will give up after they've thought it through. His words were truly domineering. It was a pity that old Mistress Shengguan and Shengguan Lingxiu had no idea who the 10 brothers who roamed the universe without a care in the world were. Naturally, they were not in awe of them. They were more shocked by the so-called ultimate heaven's force. Tianxian continent could not even resist it for more than 4 hours. What kind of level of power was that? However, Shengguan Lingxiu's new master was so boastful that old Mistress Shengguan's heart was finally at ease. It seemed that her granddaughter's immortal master was quite impressive. The ultimate heaven's force sounded grand and impressive, let's call her that for now. We'll go through the apprenticeship ceremony when we return. The lady in white smiled gently. Lingxiu is the first disciple I've taken in my life, and I'm afraid she'll be the only one. This ceremony can't be small, and the gifts that should be received won't be little either. We'll have to plunder them when the time comes. Old Mistress Shangguan felt even more assured when she heard that. As the saying went, a small clue would reveal a big picture. This beautiful immortal had high hopes for Shangguan Lingxiu. She had yet to officially take her in as a disciple, but she could already start planning for her future disciple. Honestly speaking, I have no intention of taking in a disciple at all. Who would have thought that I'd be able to take advantage of Fatty Tang in the end? This is the will of the heavens. The lady in white smiled faintly. 4 hours it is. Quickly go and do what you need to do. Don't mind me. I need to calm down and suppress my power. This realm is too fragile. Any leakage of my aura might cause a considerable impact. Then, with a slight sway of her body, she disappeared immediately. Until now, Shangguan Lingxiu's heart was still filled with trepidation. Before the 3 incense sticks were lit, Shangguan Lingxiu's heart was filled with anticipation, but there was still a hint of doubt, disbelief, as well as a sense of child's play. After the incident with the 17th Master of the Abyss's Dragon Hide treasure map, Shangguan Lingxiu had firmly believed that there were indeed immortals in this world, powerful beings that surpassed the knowledge of this world's cultivators. However, even if there were immortals, would they come in such a short amount of time? At this time, it had been close to 200 generations of the Shangguan family since the incense was given back then, and at least 5,000 years had passed. It was not just the passage of time, it would not be an exaggeration to say that the world had changed. Could it really come true? Furthermore, just like what she had said, this matter could not be settled in 2 to 3 days. Who would have thought that the immortal would really come before the incense was even finished burning? Chapter 809. Not only had the immortal come, but he had also settled the matter with a few words and set a time limit to bring her away. Shangguan Lingxiu did not doubt the statement that this world could not withstand the power of ultimate heaven and that 4 hours was the limit, but her emotions were in turmoil. There was a high chance that she would be able to sever the worldly affairs of this world once and for all with this trip. She did not know how many years it would be before she could return to this world. Even if she could return to Tianxian by then, it would be a different world, things would remain the same, but the people would be different. Shangguan Lingxiu could not help but be at a loss as her thoughts raced. It was too fast. Too hasty. There was no time to say goodbye and she had to leave immediately. Shangguan Lingxiu was heartbroken as she ran out hurriedly. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she walked. 4 hours. How could such a short amount of time be enough? Her nephews were already on the battlefield of Zio, fighting for the country and avenging their family. It was destined that they would not be able to see each other. However, there were still many people left. Old Mistress Shangguan ordered immediately, all members of the Shangguan family, gather at the front hall. All members of the Shangguan family who are in the capital must return within 2 hours. No one is allowed to defy or delay. Shangguan Lingxiu's private yard. Bai Yixue could vaguely feel the faint, unique aura coming from within, but it was just the slightest contact that made Bai Yixue shudder, as if he had fallen into an icy pit. Subconsciously, he pressed his hand on the hilt of his sword and boosted his cultivation base to its peak, ready to strike at any time. It was obvious that his alertness had risen to its peak. Supreme Cloud and Ji Lingxi were cultivating inside, intending to improve themselves. In addition, the backlash of their cultivation this time was the combined force of yin and yang. Both of them cultivating at the same time was of utmost importance and could not be disturbed by anyone or anything. If they were disturbed by external forces, the consequences would be unimaginable. Yet, Bai Yixue could feel his heart trembling. Despite his vigilance, he could still feel the faint aura within. It was unimaginably strong. Compared to him, it was no longer a big tree, an ant, a giant dragon, or a drop in the ocean. It was the difference between a human and a starry sky. The gap between them was negligible, there was no room for comparison. Fang Mafei, who was on the other side, was equally nervous, perhaps even more so than Bai Shue. Actually, Fang Mafei did not sense the unusual wave of energy in Shengguan Lingxiu's yard. His cultivation base was a few notches lower than Bai Shue's, so he was not yet qualified to sense the unusual wave. His nervousness was mainly due to fear. Bai Shue's reaction was too superficial, causing Fang Mafei to feel an odd sensation as well, causing him to be even more nervous than Bai Shue. Fang Mafei thought to himself, "Boss, oh boss, are you sure that Mr. Nian and the Four Seasons Tower's people have been chased away by you? We don't have the confidence to cultivate in such a grand manner. Look at how Bai Shue is behaving now. I'm very scared to say it, okay? If there's really an attack from an enemy of their level, we won't be able to handle it even if we risk our lives." He was nervous. Bai Shue's eyes widened abruptly. This was because he saw a woman in white suddenly appear not far away from him. There was no sign. She had appeared out of thin air. It was an empty space in front of him, there were no blind spots, but the lady in front of him had materialized out of thin air as if she had appeared out of thin air. Furthermore, her appearance did not even cause the slightest ripple in the air. She had just appeared casually, right in front of him. Her clear eyes glanced at him softly. Bai Shue's hairs stood on end as he unsheathed his sword with a clang. This was the most instinctive and subconscious movement of an ace cultivator. Almost at the same time, Bai Shue wanted to ask, "Who are you?" However, he was shocked to realize that he could not move at all. The sword was still glinting coldly in his hand, but he could not move it at all. He could not even utter a word. In spite of this, he could clearly feel that he had not been restrained. His acupoints had not been struck, and he had not been restrained by any special means. Why had he suddenly turned into a wooden statue? He wanted to call out to Fang Mafei to alert him, but he could not do so no matter how hard he tried. From the corner of his eyes, he could only see Fang Mafei at the edge of the roof, holding a long sword in his hand and clenching his teeth as he pounced down. Surprisingly, he was also immobilized. That posture looked like he was about to fall at any moment. However, he was in such an odd position, leaning forward at a 45-degree angle on the edge of the roof, sword in hand, gritting teeth with a murderous look on his face, as if he was about to strike 3,000 miles away. He was frozen. Then, the woman in white leisurely walked over and slowly moved forward. Feeling the surging mystical chi coming from the room, the lady in white chuckled softly. The affairs of the world are unpredictable, but fated encounters often occur. With this fated encounter, it's better not to leave you with this regret. I'll give you some compensation for interrupting your cultivation in order to eliminate a regret. She raised her hands lightly and drew a circle in the air, like she was drawing a circle that was not very neat. As her hands rose and fell, a ball of purple chi suddenly rose from the far east where the sun had risen. In the next moment, it had traveled an immeasurable distance and arrived above the small courtyard. It then shrunk rapidly, turning into two glowing purple balls the size of corn grains, delicate and tiny. This is the purest congenital purple chi. There are gains and losses, this is fate. The lady in white smiled faintly. With a flick of her fingers, the two little balls turned into two rays of light and shot into the room. The two amethyst aurora pearls shot out at high speed, one hit Yun Yang's dantian while the other hit Ji Lingxi's dantian. Then, they disappeared into both of their bodies. Yun Yang and Ji Lingxi, who were in the midst of cultivation and oblivious to what was happening in the outside world, suddenly felt their dantian swell. In the next moment, with a soft boom, the spiritual chi in their bodies surged at an unprecedented speed, almost uncontrollable. Under normal circumstances, or rather, in most cultivation environments, interference was absolutely forbidden. When a cultivator was disturbed in the process of cultivation, it was already a blessing from the heavens if the cultivation was interrupted. It could easily lead to turbulence of chi and blood, disorder of meridians, reverse flow of mystical chi, severe damage to one's cultivation method, or even death due to the rampaging of spiritual energy. What the lady in white had done, condensing the external force and sending it directly into Yun-Yang and Ji Lingxi's bodies, was something that should never be allowed to happen. The most direct and most likely scenario was for the two amethyst aurora pearls to self-detonate at their dantian, blowing them up into pieces and leaving nothing behind. They might even be reduced to dust and vanish from the world. In spite of this, the reality was, although both of their chi meridians were fluctuating, showing signs of going berserk, their progress was unusually stable. They broke through a barrier like a hot knife through butter. Then, with another swell, they broke through again. The process went on, and within the span of a dozen breaths, both of them had broken through 3 levels consecutively. They did not even feel the slightest bit of discomfort during the process. The torment and pain that accompanied a breakthrough in their past cultivation were absent. Up until now, the 7 pieces of purple crystals on the ground had not even absorbed 1/10 of the total amount. However, the cultivation process had been cut off automatically this time. Did this mean that the cultivation had been completed? Wasn't this result a little too unimaginable and unexpected? Although Yun-Yang had some expectations for the cultivation this time, he had initially thought that it would be enough for him and Ji Lingxi to break through a level with their combined yin and yang energy. Never would he have thought that the final result of the cultivation would be to break through 3 levels so smoothly. The result was beyond his expectations and extremely rare. When both of them woke up from their meditation, they saw the dumbfounded look on each other's faces. Chapter 8:10. What was going on? Logically speaking, the cultivation speed in the first 2 hours was already very fast, far surpassing his previous solo cultivation speed. However, it was not too outrageous. At least, it was still within the expected range. It was roughly twice as fast as his usual cultivation speed. According to this cultivation speed, it was expected that he could break through to the next level within a day and a half. This was the result that Yun-Yang had initially thought of. However, the reality now was, how could it be completed in the blink of an eye? Furthermore, it was a leap of 3 levels. The result was too shocking and defied logic. What is going on? Ji Lingxi was dumbfounded. Could it be that the effect of our joint cultivation is really that good? So strong? The corners of Yun-Yang's lips twitched. No, this is definitely not the result of our joint cultivation. Although Yun-Yang had come to this conclusion, he was once again confused when it came to further explanations. He felt that the current situation was inexplicable. How could there be a sudden breakthrough? How could there be such a logic in this world? Not because of our joint cultivation? What do you mean? Isn't this the result of our cultivation coming to an end? Ji Lingxi blinked her large eyes in bewilderment. Could it be that the heavens have opened their eyes, or perhaps our physiques have suddenly exploded? As she spoke, she hurriedly cultivated to check her body to see if there were any hidden injuries. Yun-Yang coughed. Then, he suddenly felt that, why was it so quiet outside? Bai Yishu and Feng Mafei, who were guarding outside, should have sensed the sudden change in their auras. Even if they did not come in to ask, there should at least be some movement. Yun-Yang's heart tightened as he opened the door to see what was going on. He then saw Bai Yishu standing on the spot, sweating profusely and holding his treasured sword stiffly. On the other side, Feng Mafei had still fallen from the eaves with a plop and was sprawled on the ground, unable to get up immediately. Yun-Yang was shocked to see this and called out, "Which friend has come? Please show yourself." Everything that was happening before him was not a coincidence. It must be the arrival of a top-notch expert or an unparalleled master who was so strong that it was beyond common sense. A faint, smiling voice suddenly rang out from behind him. "I'm right here. Can't you see me?" Yun-Yang turned back abruptly and his eyes widened at the sight. It was not because of how beautiful the person before him was, but because of Ji Lingxi. Right behind Ji Lingxi, a shoulder behind, was a lady dressed in white, walking out of the room. No, the reality was that the woman was almost sticking to Ji Lingxi, but Ji Lingxi did not even notice it as she leaped out of the room nervously. "Yin-Yang, is it the Four Seasons Tower's men?" Yin-yang sucked in a deep breath, instinctively aware of the woman's power. She was unimaginably powerful, terrifyingly powerful. Ji Lingxi's current cultivation base was a level higher than hers. In terms of cultivation base alone, there was probably no one in the entire Tianxian continent who could compare to her. However, Ji Lingxi did not notice the lady in white who was sticking close to her from behind at all. Moreover, the woman had spoken just now. Yin-yang was sure that he had not used any form of telepathy. However, Ji Lingxi did not hear it either. Yin-yang said in a low voice, "Good move, sir." Ji Lingxi stared at Yin-yang, who was standing right in front of her, and asked in bewilderment, "What do you mean? What nonsense are you spouting at me? It wasn't me who broke through just now. The red glow on me didn't even move. It really wasn't me." Yin-yang did not answer, focusing his attention on what was behind Ji Lingxi. Ji Lingxi's mind raced as she sensed something. Turning her head quickly, she cried out in shock the moment her gaze landed on something. She leaped 30 to 40 feet away and landed behind Yin-yang, her face drained of color. There was actually someone following her without a sound. Heavens, this is really too scary. The lady in white looked at Yin-yang with a smile. Seeing the shock in his eyes but not the slightest hint of fear, she could not help chuckling and complimenting him. "Yin-yang, you're not bad indeed." Yin-yang asked cautiously, "May I ask who you are? What business do you have with me?" The lady in white seemed to think about it and said with a smile, "You're not qualified to know the answer to this question yet. However, I can tell you that I'm Shangguan Lingxiu's master. If you bully my disciple in the future, I won't forgive you." Shangguan Lingxiu's master? Yin-yang was puzzled. Since when did Shangguan Lingxiu have a master? Why did he not know about it? Furthermore, it was a superb master with such ability. That was not right. If Shangguan Lingxiu had such a master, how could her ability be limited to this? This did not make sense either. However, you've subdued my people the moment you've arrived. What do you mean by that? Yin-yang did not want to dwell on Shangguan Lingxiu's matter anymore and calmly adjusted the direction of the question. The white-clothed woman smiled. "The person who restrained you is nothing. I'm just here to see you. I don't want to waste my breath and cause more trouble, that's all." If you feel uncomfortable restraining just two of you, I can make the two of you stay still and listen to me." Yin-yang's expressionless face twitched. He wore a faint smile, but his eyes were gleaming coldly. "In this continent, I've never seen anyone who can subdue me without making a sound." His body had turned into the form of a cloud, tangible but intangible. Although he looked like he was still standing there, his essence had already turned into the form of a cloud. With Yin-yang's current cultivation base and ability, he was certain that even if the Four Seasons Tower's experts were to attack him together, or even if all the martial practitioners of the continent were to attack him together, they would not be able to subdue him. The lady in white smiled faintly and said, "Then I'll let you experience what they feel now." She then raised a hand and grabbed forward. Yin-yang's thoughts raced, a chill rising within him. He dared not rely too much on the formless form of his cloud form. He vanished with a whoosh, turning into a breeze and escaping swiftly. He snorted inwardly, "Your cultivation base is strong and difficult to fight, but can I just stand there and let you grab me? How can I be subdued when I turn into the wind and cloud?" The next moment, the white-clothed woman's hand followed its original trajectory and grabbed at the air very slowly. She said softly, "You're really too weak now. It's really not much more difficult than grabbing an ant. I still have to control my strength so that I won't crush you." She closed her palms and said softly, "Come out." Before her words echoed in the air, Yin-yang's formless wind form disappeared at once. He had turned into a tangible form and was pulled out from the void, standing stiffly in front of the lady in white. Yin-yang's eyes were filled with despair. He had no other feelings. Until now, he still did not know how he had been pulled out. There was no abnormality in the spiritual energy wave in the air just now, nor was there any trace of mystical qi. There was nothing when he probed with his deific consciousness. How did I get caught? Who am I? Where am I? Chapter 8:11. Seeing that Yun Yang was defeated, Ji Lingxi took a step forward and stood in front of Yun Yang without hesitation. She raised her palm and struck at the lady in white. The gust of the palm was piercingly cold, filled with a whistling sound. After her breakthrough, Ji Lingxi's cultivation base was almost unrivaled in the world. The force of the palm strike was unstoppable. Even pinnacle experts like Ling Xiaozui, De Guchou, and Mr. Nian might not dare to face it head-on. In spite of this, the lady in white merely smiled faintly and raised her hand gently to receive the attack. Two slender hands met in the air with a loud bang. Ji Lingxi could only feel a sudden surge of energy that she could not defend herself against. There was no room for resistance at all. In spite of this, Ji Lingxi felt relieved instead. You've been tricked. I'm not really going to fight you with my palm strike, I'm going to counterattack with the red light. Seeing that the other party could easily break Yun Yang's unique power with ease, how could Ji Lingxi not know that she could not be defeated by force? Since she knew that she could not defeat the other party, she would resort to a different tactic. Cheat red light, come at me quickly. A playful smile hung on the lady in white's face as she increased the force of her palm strike. In the next moment, a beam of red light appeared as expected and rose slowly. Ji Lingxi took 2 steps back and looked at the lady in white in front of her rather smugly. Your looks make me jealous, but you're going to fall in my hands eventually. It had to be said that this was probably the only time in Ji Lingxi's life that she did not hate the red lights so much. The red light's domineering invincibility was deeply ingrained in Ji Lingxi's heart. Its irresistible characteristic had never failed until now. Even though the lady in front of her was unfathomably profound and had an unimaginably profound cultivation base that was beyond her knowledge, there was no exception. Ji Lingxi was utterly convinced that her plan had succeeded. She just wanted to see how successful it could be. However, her mouth fell open in the next moment, her eyes filled with shock. However, the woman in white was still calm and relaxed in the face of the red light. With a light smile on her face, she pointed with her slender finger and actually caught the dense red light in her hand. She had caught it in her hand. Ji Lingxi's eyeballs bulged. What was going on? How could this be? What happened to his domineering, irresistible, and indomitable aura? The woman in white smiled gently and said, "This thing is probably the result of your father's effort." "Ah, it's a token of goodwill." Parents in the world are always worried about their children. With a wave of his hand, he sent the red light back to where it came from and melted back into Ji Lingxi's body. Ji Lingxi was still in a daze, completely unaware of what was happening. She was really frightened at this moment. She couldn't understand why the red protective light, which could repel all evil in the past, and no one could resist or shake it. Why did it suddenly fail today? This was illogical. The lady in white smiled warmly again. With a wave of her hand, she undid Yun Yang's restraints and said, "You two brats are making a fuss out of nothing. Why are you showing your trump cards so openly? I don't have any malicious intentions towards you. I just wanted to see you two in passing. You're here to see us?" Yun Yang acutely sensed the hidden problem in his words. "Do you know us? Or do they know our elders?" The lady in white smiled and said softly, "It's only a matter of time whether we know each other or not." Yun Yang realized at once that the lady in white before him was actually an extremely remarkable character. If he was not mistaken, she could very well be an unparalleled expert on the same level as his aunt, who had appeared mysteriously. His ability to manifest wind and cloud to its limit was still easily captured and restrained. Ji Lingxi's red light, the undefeatable red light that had never been shaken, was also easily subdued. Such unparalleled might was truly shocking, terrifying, and unimaginable. Ji Lingxi asked, "Then who are you?" The lady in white answered, "My surname is Mei. You can call me Aunt Mei." "You can as well." The latter part of her sentence was directed at Yun Yang. Sure enough, it was another aunt. The term unparalleled expert was no longer sufficient to describe the lady in white's level. Should she be called an expert of the universe? Yin Yang vaguely guessed something, and a strange thought popped into his head. Why were the experts of the universe all female? Could it be that there was an abundance of yin and a decline of yang? The lady in white, Aunt May, waved her hand again, and the restraints on Feng Mafei and Bai Yishue were removed. She then said amiably, "Come, come. Talk with me for a while, both of you. Let me see what you've learned. Although the limit of this world is above my expectations, the time I can stay in this world is still limited. Try to talk about the important things." Ji Lingxi stammered, "May. Aunt May. Do you know my father?" The lady in white raised her eyebrows and wore an amused smile as she said, I suppose you can say that you know him?" Yin Yang's thoughts raced. This sentence was thought-provoking, and had a profound meaning. Ji Lingxi did not think much about it. She said through gritted teeth, "What's that old bastard's name?" The lady in white was stunned. No matter how intelligent and wise she was, she would never have thought that a daughter would spout such vulgarities, directed at her biological father. Then, the lady in white chuckled and said, "Old bastard. These 3 words do match your father's temperament. Just right, a perfect match, ha ha ha." She was overjoyed. Ji Lingxi blushed and said, "Tell me, what's his name? And who's my mother? Is she still around?" The lady in white said, don't worry. Your father and mother are alive and well. Actually, they miss you every day as well. It's just that it's not convenient for them to come and see you. There must be a reason behind this." Ji Lingxi grew nervous. What reason? Could it be that they've been imprisoned? The girl's imagination ran wild. Her eyes were rimmed with tears as she said, Could it be that my father and mother have encountered an insurmountable danger? Attacked by a strong enemy, they were captured because they couldn't handle it? Before they were captured, they used the last of their cultivation base to throw me and my brother out? That's why we... The lady in white's eyes grew wider and wider, her cherry lips almost agape. She looked like she had lost her composure. It was obvious that she was stunned by Ji Lingxi's wild imagination. However, almighty cultivators were almighty cultivators. Soon after, he put away his surprised expression and nodded repeatedly. He even forced himself to sigh and said, Your guess is slightly biased. However, it is true that your father and mother are not living very well now. Strong enemies are waiting for them, and danger lurks everywhere. Chapter 8:12. That was so dangerous. Ji Lingxi felt the rock in her heart disappear in an instant, replaced by an indescribable sadness and concern. Didn't he have any helpers? It must be because he's not very popular. The lady in white sighed softly. I can't tell you too much right now. I can't even tell you their names. If I tell you now, it'll only harm you. Ji Lingxi was about to plead when the lady in white said, Your cultivation base is still shallow. You've never seen the state of being born and destroyed in an instant. You don't know that a single thought can trigger the sudden inspiration and cause signs to appear. Many disasters that shouldn't befall you are born from this. All in all, as long as you cultivate diligently and raise your cultivation base to a certain level as soon as possible, you'll know when it's time to know. Perhaps when that time comes, you'll really have to, personally save your parents from the abyss of suffering. The lady in white said. Ji Lingxi bit her lip, her heart knotted in knots. Her eyes were brimming with tears, her heart in turmoil. Not good. Strong enemies lay in wait, danger lurking in every corner. In the abyss of suffering. You'll have to save them personally. The information contained in these few sentences was too much, and too negative. I've been wrong about you all this time. I didn't know that your situation was so dangerous. You guys still risked your lives to send us out under such dire circumstances. You even spent so much effort to build that red shield for me, afraid that your daughter would be harmed in this mortal world. Ji Lingxi's heart was filled with sorrow. Tears streamed down her cheeks like rain, looking pitiful. Cough, cough. The lady in white coughed, her expression tinged with awkwardness. I'm not wrong. Yes, I'm not wrong at all. Your father is being attacked by his brothers now. Almost no one is on his side. Of course, he's in a miserable state. His brothers are all mighty beings in the universe. Strong enemies are indeed waiting for him, and danger lurks everywhere. As for your mother is also a ruthless person. She fights with your father every day, so naturally, your father falls deeper and deeper into the abyss of suffering. There's nothing wrong with that. As the saying goes, husband and wife are one, inseparable. Your father naturally represents your mother. Since your father is in dire straits, your mother is naturally in there as well. There's nothing wrong with that. All of this, I'm just telling the truth. You're the one who's imagining the worst. This, you really can't blame me. However, this lass's imagination really broke through the horizon. She was too imaginative, too good at imagining things. You're actually being hunted down, imprisoned, waiting for rescue, using the last bit of my strength to save you at the last moment. Why didn't he go write novels if he had this kind of imagination? What a pity, Yin Yang, who was beside her, asked, then. Auntie May, do you know my father? Aunt May almost held her head and cried out in pain. Did I come here today to answer the questions of you two question babies? And it's all about your father? Your father. I've seen him before. Everything is due to fate and fate. The lady in white expressed her helplessness. It was impossible to say that they did not know each other. Basically, these people would gather together to fight every year. Your father is an old schemer. Actually, it was not only him, there were also the 9 Abyss young masters who talked about justice and justice. They were all old fellows. How are my father and mother now? Yin Yang asked, are they well? Are they in danger again? The woman in white thought for a moment, organized her words, and said, your parents should be together now. There's nothing wrong with this. They're together every day. I haven't said that they're in a love-hate relationship yet. Even if I did, it would be correct. Yin Yang and Ji Lingxi's expressions changed at the same time. From the conversation just now, it was not difficult to guess that Ji Lingxi's parents were trapped by strong enemies and were in dire straits. If Yin Yang's parents were with them, did it not mean that they were trapped as well? Ji Lingxi's tears rolled down her cheeks. So uncle and aunt are in dire straits as well. Why is that? Yin Yang, on the other hand, was filled with doubts. This is different from what my aunt told me last time. Yin Yang said calmly, may I ask, Senior, who captured them? Let us know what's going on so that we won't be unaware when we face our enemies. The lady in white was about to speak when she heard the voice that came from beside her ears. She could not help but be stunned. She then said, I'll tell you through telepathy, but you have to keep this a secret, at least for the time being. You can't reveal anything, not even to each other. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. What I said just now isn't a lie. If you speak here, the other party will be born immediately. Ji Lingxi nodded seriously. I won't reveal anything. I won't say a single word. Yin Yang was thinking, is it true or false? Is it that incredible? Was it true or false? The lady in white said softly, the person who captured your parents is not only immeasurably powerful, but his name is also very strange. His name is the first young master of the abyss. As she spoke, the lady in white could not help saying in her heart, I'm sorry, old black. They all want to blame you, I can't do anything about it. Ji Lingxi clenched her teeth in hatred. Young Master Jiu Yu. She enunciated each word, her eyes glaring at him, her hatred seeping deep into her bones. Yin Yang repeated slowly, first young master of the abyss? This name seems rather familiar. The unrivaled expert rumored to be the unrivaled 17th young master of the abyss. I wondered if he's related to this first young master of the abyss. The lady in white said, not only are they related, they're both descendants of the 9 abyss. It's just that the 17th young master is the 17th generation descendant of the 9 abyss young masters. As for the first young master, he's the first generation ancestor and the most powerful one among the 9 abyss young masters. Yin Yang mused and asked, how powerful is he? How powerful exactly? The lady in white pondered for a moment and said, perhaps in your eyes, moving mountains and filling oceans, ascending to the heavens and burrowing into the earth, is already powerful enough. However, this first young master of the abyss ability. How? The continent beneath your feet can be destroyed hundreds and thousands of times by the first young master of the abyss with a stomp of his feet. He can annihilate the sun, moon, and stars with just a puff of air. Life and death with just a thought isn't an exaggeration. The lady in white said slowly. Yin Yang and Ji Lingxi were shocked. Destroy the continent hundreds and thousands of times with a stomp of his feet? Annihilate the sun, moon, and stars with a puff of air? What kind of ability was this? Could there really be such a terrifying ability in the universe? I'm not exaggerating at all. In fact, it's because you two know too little that can be used as a comparison. I'm just giving a rough explanation. This is the reason why an ordinary realm can't bear the power of ultimate heaven. The lady in white's expression was solemn. Therefore, before your abilities are sufficient, don't seek death recklessly. Both Yun Yang and Ji Lingxi wore grim expressions. Ji Lingxi was worried, tears welling up in her eyes as she panicked. Yin Yang frowned, calculating in his heart, is it true? Is it true? Chapter 8:13. Work hard, children. There was an indescribable pity in the lady's voice. When your cultivation base reaches a level where you can use it, your parents' friends will come to find you and rescue them together. There are too few existences in the universe who can save them. Perhaps, there's no one else other than their direct bloodline. She said in a low voice, this is the unique arcane skill of the 9 hells. For a moment, Yin Yang was a little uncertain. Could it be true? The lady in white looked calm, but her actions were solemn. She was already struggling to control her emotions and almost burst out laughing a few times, but she managed to hold it in. After all, she was a composed person who had lived for countless years, so there was not a single flaw in her expression. As for the telepathic messages from the outer layer, they had already gone through countless rounds. You're too mischievous. What's wrong with that? If I don't find a chance to teach old Black a lesson, he'll really think that I can't handle him. Won't you provoke karma again by doing this? You've already provoked one last time. Now that you're provoking old Black, when will it end? So what? I always think that it's better to accept more karma like this. They want to achieve good things smoothly and pass on their legacy, but how can it be so easy in this universe? They didn't even come to greet me. Let's see what they can do to me. But it's too much for you to trip them up like this. They're your parents. They're using my territory to do something now. How can I not do something about it? I'm not in the wrong here. I'm afraid old Black's going to be maligned by you after this. It's a good thing to have all your efforts in vain. What's more, this is the effect I want. You've taken in disciples now, haven't you? Yes, I'll bring them back later. I'll take in 2 disciples later too. I can't let someone monopolize the limelight. So this is what you're planning. It's not a bad idea. Have you thought of it too? This way, it's our people and theirs. What does it have to do with old Black? I'm so happy, I'm so happy. Pooh. You might be happy, but old Black had gone through a lot of trouble to get this opportunity. Back then, he borrowed the bound of universe to set up the formation so that he could borrow some luck to become the 9 underworlds. In the end, one of you substituted him, and the other turned him into an enemy. Old Black spent so much effort to groom an enemy for himself? This is too much. Cough, isn't it still negotiable? As long as he apologizes to me, I'll return it to him. Look at Justice, he's so broad-minded and tolerant. That's the kind of person who understands and is open-minded. Pfft. The woman in white almost spat out another mouthful of blood. Apologize? Did they offend you? You've been the one causing trouble for me all these years, okay? Not only have you not taken enough advantage of me, you haven't caused enough trouble either. In any case, it's his fault. The voice on the other side said confidently, "Do you think I'm the kind of person who casually causes trouble and causes karma?" The current situation was that he had done something wrong first. Since he was the one in the wrong, I want him to apologize. Don't tell me it's Li Kuei instead. The woman in white was stunned. What she had just said did make some sense. However, could she really say it like that? Twisting logic? Hitting the nail on the head? Pestering endlessly? Come back quickly once you're done, lest this little fellow sees through you. This child is as cunning as his father. In his realm, he's called Supreme Wit. He's very arrogant, the voice on the other side urged. This child isn't like his father at all. This little fellow is full of righteousness and righteousness. He's obviously the kind of person who serves the country and the people. He's a righteous person, a famous and real hero, the main character of another legend and myth under the stars. The voice on the other side said, "Oh? Isn't he about the same as me? Is he that outstanding?" The woman in white rolled her eyes, speechless, and cut off the call unilaterally. She had never seen such a shameless person. You're obviously the epitome of evil. How can you compare yourself to Yun Yang? He's a true hero, a true man, all right? It was then that Shangguan Lingxiu could be seen walking in from outside the yard with reddened eyes. Every step she took was as heavy as a mountain. Her gaze towards Yun Yang and Ji Lingxi was filled with reluctance. "Lingxiu is here." The woman in white, Aunt May, said, "I'm about to bring her away. Make it short if you have anything to say. Farewell. There's no time to waste in the future, but I think you'll meet again then. See you again." Ji Lingxi lifted her head abruptly. "Sister Lingxiu is leaving with you, Aunt? For how long?" The light in the girl's eyes turned into reluctance, filled with unwillingness. "I don't have the final say on how long." The woman in white, Aunt May, said warmly, "This will depend on how hard she works and how hard all of you work." Ji Lingxi was stunned when she heard that. Aunt May's words had just echoed when she vanished with a whoosh. Bai Yixue and Fang Mafei had disappeared with her. Obviously, she had thrown both of them out. Only Yun Yang, Ji Lingxi, and Shangguan Lingxiu were left in the small yard, forming a relatively private space. In spite of this, the three of them were speechless for a long time. After a while, Ji Lingxi bit her lip and forced a smile, saying hoarsely, "I'll wait for all of you outside. You guys talk." As she spoke, she turned and walked out. Shangguan Lingxiu's eyes were filled with gratitude. The significance of Ji Lingxi's retreat now was too great. Until now, all the promises of the past were nothing more than an illusion. If she were to go back on her word, there was nothing to be blamed for it. There was no substance to it. Ji Lingxi's decision to leave now and leave the place to Shangguan Lingxiu was a stark contrast to her usual attitude at this moment of parting. This proved one thing: Ji Lingxi had completely acknowledged Shangguan Lingxiu as one of her family. Or rather, it was the Yun family. With this retreat today, she would never take this step back in this lifetime. As long as Shangguan Lingxiu's heart did not change, as long as Yun Yang did not die, everything was set in stone. Although she had a conclusion in her heart and had taken action, Ji Lingxi could not help but sigh inwardly when she left. Chapter 8:14. Ji Lingxi was stunned for a moment before understanding dawned on her. She forced a smile and said, Sister Lingxiu has a gentle temperament and a resolute personality. She's a remarkable woman. She treats her enemies coldly and attends to her mistress. Which man wouldn't look at her? Despite the bitterness in my heart, I'm more than happy about it. The lady in white stared at her and asked, "The truth?" "The truth," Ji Lingxi replied seriously. The lady in white pondered for a moment before replying in a low voice, "Not bad. You're really not bad." Ji Lingxi smiled and said, "Actually, we've seen Sister Lingxiu's worries all this while and we're anxious about it. However, the issue of one's foundation isn't something that can be solved in a hurry. Even if we want to, we can't solve it. After all, it's difficult to achieve the desired effect in a short period of time, be it by accumulating treasured gems or building a perfect cultivation environment. Now that Sister Lingxiu has acknowledged Aunt Mei as her master, she can solve this shortcoming in the shortest time possible. We can only be happy for her." The lady in white, Aunt Mei, hummed in agreement and nodded. "That's true. Now that she's my disciple, even if her foundation is weak, I have the means to help her make up for it in a short period of time. What comes next is nothing more than training her state of mind and adapting to the experience. Perhaps, Lingxiu's cultivation base will surpass both of you for a long time to come." Ji Lingxi said hopefully, "Aunt Mei, you possess extraordinary powers and your cultivation base is even more profound. I wonder how you compare to the first master of the ninth abyss?" The corners of Aunt Mei's lips twitched subconsciously as she replied, "That first master of the ninth abyss. Although my cultivation base is already considered top-notch, there's still a gap when it comes to facing him head-on. I've never been unduly humble, but this is the truth." Ji Lingxi was deeply worried as she said, "The first master of the ninth abyss that you mentioned just now, blowing down the sun, moon, and stars with a single breath. What an unimaginable force." Aunt Mei nodded and said, "His ability is far beyond that. Or rather, I wouldn't have paid any attention to him if that was the extent of his ability. In fact, the so-called blowing down the sun, moon, and stars is roughly like this." With that said, he waved his hand and shouted, "Reversal of day and night." Then, Ji Lingxi saw the sun that had been hanging high in the sky suddenly set in a hurry. A full moon appeared in the sky, illuminated by twinkling stars. The weather changed abruptly. Day turned into night in an instant. This scene only lasted for a single sentence from the woman in white. The whole of Tiantang City fell into an uproar in the face of such a sudden change. Ji Lingxi was dumbfounded as she murmured, "This is the reversal of the sun and moon, the reversal of the stars?" Aunt Mei chuckled. "You're currently limited by your horizons. You're thinking too naively. My actions so far are merely to clearly show what it means to blow down the sun, moon, and stars." After pausing for a moment, he pointed somewhere and said, "Do you see that? There is a slightly dim star beside the moon." Ji Lingxi looked over and said, "I saw it." "Why?" Aunt Mei was very gentle as she said, "This is the so-called blowing down the sun, moon, and stars with one breath." As she spoke, she pursed her lips and blew out a breath. A beam of white light sped forward and disappeared with a whoosh. In the next moment, Ji Lingxi clearly saw the star that had been dimming suddenly explode in the night sky, turning into fireflies that filled the sky. In the vast starry sky, a dazzling meteor shower appeared. Ji Lingxi's mouth was agape, her eyeballs almost popping out of their sockets. Her mind was blank from the shock. Day and night were overturned with one shout. Exploding a star with one breath, scattering it into a meteor shower. Was this the work of a human? The result of a shout and a puff of air? Aunt Mei said softly, "Only when one's cultivation base has reached this stage can one be said to have reached a certain realm." Ji Lingxi's scalp prickled as she trembled, unable to speak for a moment. "The first master of the abyss is twice as powerful as I am," Aunt Mei said softly. At this moment, Ji Lingxi suddenly felt that the road ahead was far and far away. Although it was not to the extent that the future was bleak, it was still bleak. Aunt Mei's cultivation base had obviously reached a profound realm that the world could not understand, recognize, or even imagine. Yet, the first master of the abyss was even more powerful than Aunt May. Then, when would he be able to save his parents? Even if he and Yin Yang were to join forces, how could they be his enemies? Thinking of this, tears streamed down her cheeks. Let me tell you one more thing, Aunt May said softly, don't ask how far the road ahead is. Just keep moving forward. Yin Yang has the potential to reach that stage. Not only him, you have it too. It all depends on whether you can do it. Yin Yang has the potential to reach that stage, and so do you. His words of encouragement to Ji Lingxi was unparalleled. She looked up abruptly. Really? You're not lying to me, are you? Aunt May smiled. Why would I lie to you? Don't tell me you can't feel the changes in your body. This is the power your father has imparted to you. What's more, you've only obtained 1,000th of the power he has imparted to you. Ji Lingxi's eyes glowed. I understand now, Aunt May. Aunt May said, in the future, I'll let Shangguan Lingxiu come with all of you, to deal with, the first master of the abyss, that person. She wanted to go along with the telepathic message and mention the devil, but she could not bring herself to do so. After all, it would be too harsh on her conscience. She even felt an inexplicable sense of guilt. This first master of the abyss is really unlucky. I don't even know anything, but I've already become the biggest devil in the imagination of these young people. What an undeserved disaster, to think that you've borrowed the bound of universe to set up and nurtured a perfect ally for yourself. But you shouldn't know that things have changed completely this time, right? Not only have you been replaced by someone else, but you've also nurtured a powerful enemy for yourself. What kind of friends have you made? Other than tripping each other up, you've been setting each other up. Being careless in making friends is no longer enough to describe it. This is the embodiment of a serious failure as a person. However, recalling how the first master of the abyss had tricked her husband previously, Aunt May felt relieved. Who else would I have tricked if not you? Who asked you to be a failure as a person and make enemies everywhere? These people have joined forces, including your own family's interference now. It's all your fault, you blackmailer. With your strength alone, how can you fight against so many people at once? Chapter 8:15. Aunt May waved her hand and the order of heaven and earth resumed its normal operation. She said with a smile, Lingxi, the red glow on you doesn't differentiate between friend and foe. It bothers you a lot, doesn't it? Ji Lingxi blushed. It's all right, it's still very useful, Aunt May smiled meaningfully. Is it really useful? What if I say that I can remove it for you? Remove it? Ji Lingxi was dumbfounded. Was this Yun Yang's biggest wish all this while? Ji Lingxi could see that Yun Yang harbored a deep grudge against the red glow on her. He hated it to the core. If he really did get rid of it, he would probably be eaten up by him in a few days. Yet, she could not muster the slightest intention to resist him. I think I shouldn't. Ji Lingxi blushed. This can be considered a goal to strive for in the short term. The pros will always outweigh the cons. Oh, so the pros outweigh the cons. Aunt May replied meaningfully. Ji Lingxi blushed. Women. Aunt May hugged Ji Lingxi's shoulder and said, sometimes, you have to know how to tolerate and give in. However, sometimes, you can't even take a step back. You'll only understand the propriety when the time comes, but just knowing isn't enough. You have to grasp it and strike when you should. Ji Lingxi hummed in acknowledgement, nodding in agreement instinctively, but there was still a hint of confusion in her eyes. Cherish the people in front of you. When the woman in white saw that she didn't really understand, she sighed softly and said something else. This group of little girls in the small courtyard. Shangguan Lingxiu looked at Yun Yang, her face pale and her gaze filled with an indescribable infatuation. For a moment, there was nothing to say. Yin Yang could only feel a bitter emotion rising within him. He, who was usually glib and eloquent, could not utter a single word at this moment. Both of them had feelings for each other and knew each other well. They had not intentionally avoided each other. In spite of this, there was no actual intimate contact. Based on this alone, he was even worse than Yun Yang and Ji Lingxi. Although Ji Lingxi's red light was annoying and domineering, there was still a buffer when it was triggered. As Yun Yang continued to experiment in a semi-passive manner, he could still occasionally touch her hand. Of course, the consequences were still severe. As for Shangguan Lingxiu, both of them had never even held hands. I'm leaving. Shangguan Lingxiu flashed a gentle smile as usual and said softly, this time, Yun Yang took a deep breath and said, yes, I know. Shangguan Lingxiu said, I won't be by your side from now on. Take care. I will, definitely. Yun Yang looked at the beautiful face in front of him and said softly, Aunt Mei is an unparalleled expert. Being able to acknowledge her as your master is the greatest opportunity of your life, Sister Lingxiu. You must cultivate well and advance bravely. Don't worry about us. Shangguan Lingxiu hummed in agreement and said sadly, Yun Yang, I understand what you're saying, but we won't see each other for a long, long time. Yun Yang said seriously, how can it be long? You'll improve quickly with the guidance of a master. I won't be complacent either and will work hard to move forward. I believe that the day we meet again in the bound of universe won't be far. Meet again. These words were of utmost importance to Shangguan Lingxiu now. She felt her heart that had been drifting aimlessly in the air settle down at once, becoming firm and resolute. There were no more doubts. You must be well. Yun Yang exhorted in a low voice. Shangguan Lingxiu lowered her head and answered meekly. Yun Yang sighed softly and said, Aunt Mei's identity, background, and power are far beyond what I know. My parting gift to you probably won't catch their attention. He chuckled softly and said, however, my woman is going on a long journey. No matter what, this farewell gift is indispensable. With a flip of his wrist, he took out a ring and said, this is a cultivation resource that I'm giving you. Keep it well. When we arrive at the sect, we have our own confidence. There's no need to be too humble. Shangguan Lingxiu was shocked, her face flushing. Yun Yang's woman. The shock that these words brought to her was indescribable. Shangguan Lingxiu's gaze was like water as she looked at the black ring before her. Unexpectedly, there was shyness in her eyes as she extended her right hand and said in a low voice, help me put it on. Yun Yang smiled softly. Once you put it on, you won't have to take it off for the rest of your life. Shangguan Lingxiu said with a blushing face, if I still have to take it off, why would I wear it? Yun Yang laughed and picked up the ring, slipping it onto Shangguan Lingxiu's right ring finger gently. Throughout the process, Shangguan Lingxiu was trembling, her face flushed, but she did not budge. She only stared at Yun Yang's face in a daze, as if she was trying to engrave this face into the depths of her heart. He would never forget this moment for the rest of his life. After a long, long time, Shangguan Lingxiu approached Yun Yang slowly. She seemed to hesitate for a moment before she suddenly stood on her tiptoes and pressed her trembling lips against Yun Yang's. Yun Yang could feel that the beauty's lips were exceptionally cold and trembling. The indescribable fragrance was refreshing, but it was also filled with an unforgettable tenderness that flowed into his heart. He could not help but extend his arm and wrap it around Shangguan Lingxiu's slender waist. After a long time, their lips parted once more. Shangguan Lingxiu looked at Yun Yang's face in a daze and stepped back slowly. I'm leaving. I'm really leaving. Yun Yang said softly, I'll work even harder. I look forward to the day we meet again. Shangguan Lingxiu's beautiful eyes stared deeply into Yun Yang's. After a while, a tear finally trickled down slowly. Finally, she turned and dashed out of the door without looking back. 2 drops of crystal-clear tears fell to the ground. Ji Lingxi was still waiting by the door. He almost collided with Shangguan Lingxiu, but just as he took a step back, Shangguan Lingxiu had already hugged him tightly. Instantly, Ji Lingxi felt her shoulder drenched in tears. It was unknown if the protective red light was sexist or if it was accurate in judging the intention of the person close to it, but it did not appear to disrupt the situation. Seeing Shangguan Lingxiu like this, Ji Lingxi was enlightened. Her tears fell uncontrollably as she hugged Shangguan Lingxiu tightly. "Sister Lingxiu, take care. I'll wait for you to come back with Yunyang. I'll catch up to you as soon as possible." The two girls could not stop sobbing as they hugged each other. Aunt May, who was dressed in white, stood on the side with her arms folded. Her sharp eyes watched the two girls' tears, especially Ji Lingxi's. After a while, she lowered her head, but the expression on her face was much gentler. It's rare to find a heart of innocence. Finally. Under Yunyang and Ji Lingxi's longing gazes and old Mistress Shangguan's reluctant face, Aunt May, who was dressed in white, said faintly, "How can there be an end to the love between a man and a woman? Don't sink into the path to heaven." Chapter 8:16. With a wave of her hand, a black hole the size of a house appeared in the sky with a soft hiss. On the other side of the black hole, it was not endless darkness but beautiful scenery. One could even see a clear lake on the other side. In the next moment, the lady in white brought Shangguan Lingxiu along and both of them went to the lake on the other side of the black hole with a slight movement. They were within sight, but they were already in two different worlds. Aunt May, the lady in white, waved her hand in their direction and the black hole disappeared swiftly. In the blink of an eye, the space returned to its original state, the scenery on the other side no longer visible. Ji Lingxi sucked in a breath and said, "So, going from one world to another under the hands of a true almighty master, it's so easy, so effortless, by the lake in another world." The lady in white looked at Shangguan Lingxiu curiously. "Look, what did your lover give you as a parting gift? How dare he claim to be so confident? I'm rather curious, where did his confidence come from?" Two words of confidence, interdependent and interdependent. Whether it was true or not, however, was yet to be determined. Shangguan Lingxiu opened the spatial ring with a blush and said after a glance, "What is this? I don't recognize it at all. I've never seen it before. It's probably some pretty purple crystals. What kind of ore is it?" Aunt May hummed in agreement and said in surprise, "Purple crystals? Ore? Let me have a look at one." Shangguan Lingxiu fished one out from the spatial ring just now and felt a thick wave of spiritual qi assaulting her immediately. It was suffocating. Shocked, she quickly channeled her cultivation method to resist it and cried out involuntarily, "What is this? Why is it so domineering?" "It's a supreme-grade purple crystal." Aunt May recognized it with a single glance. She was slightly surprised as she said, "Yes, it's not just supreme-grade. It should be God-grade. Although I have this thing here and it's not rare, it's as difficult as ascending the heavens to find a God-grade purple crystal like this in a continent that's barren with resources like yours. This fellow is generous, but you can't handle this for now. You'll need to cultivate again before you can use it." Then he asked curiously, "How much did he give you?" Shangguan Lingxiu took a look and exclaimed in surprise, "A lot." She paused and said, "Very much so." This time, Aunt May was really a little curious. "Let me see all of them. These are pure energy crystals. Although they aren't very rare, it takes time to condense them. I don't have a lot of them with me." He's really interested in you. When he took a look, he couldn't help but jump in shock. 10,000 yuan. Her shock was not due to the number of purple crystals Yunyang had given her. At her level, purple crystals were easily obtainable. It could be said that she could have as many as she wanted. At most, it would just take her some time. However, for a mighty person like her, time was no longer a problem. What truly shocked her was that Yunyang was actually generous enough to give away so many resources in one go in a place like the Tianxian continent, where resources were extremely scarce. This was no longer a matter of generosity, it was simply unbelievably generous. This kind of sincerity is very heavy. Aunt May sighed softly, it's easy to find a priceless treasure, but it's hard to find a lover. You must cherish it. Shangguan Lingxiu looked blissful. Oh, there's something else. I almost got a treasure. Aunt May flipped through the items and found another good item. She could not help exclaiming in admiration after examining it with her deific consciousness, I didn't expect it to be this. This is the real good stuff. Lingxiu, it looks like this fiancé of yours really has you in his heart. You mustn't let him down in the future. If you really do, I'll be the first to not forgive you. Shangguan Lingxiu said shyly, what are you talking about, master? Aunt May retrieved a piece from the spatial ring with a swoosh. It was a huge lotus leaf. It was emerald green and glistening. A lotus leaf? This is... Shangguan Lingxiu said in surprise. She had seen the lotus leaf almost immediately when she was checking the items in the spatial ring, but she did not pay much attention to it. To her, Yin Yang's gift to her had a greater symbolic meaning, and the amethyst looked better as well. She had almost walked away with a treasure indeed. This isn't an ordinary lotus leaf. Aunt May said seriously, this is a treasure of heaven's will. I'll teach you the method later. Infuse your own blood into this lotus leaf. After the blood bond is completed, this lotus leaf can change its form according to your will. Any saber or sword can change into a myriad of forms, all of them as one. Similarly, they're indestructible and indestructible. Similarly, it can be turned into clothes. If it's turned into clothes, not only will it be invulnerable to weapons and water and fire, it'll also be immune to all evils and demons. Aunt May clicked her tongue in admiration. This Yun brat is really willing. I really have a whole new level of respect for him now. There aren't many men who can do something like this. You're really lucky. Shangguan Lingxiu looked bashful. Other than bliss, there was only contentment. She was in high spirits and proud of herself. I didn't expect that even I would have times where I've misjudged it. I'm afraid you'll have to think about what you want it to become next. I'll ask your grandmaster to bless you. Aunt May's tone suddenly turned gloomy. Shangguan Lingxiu was unfazed by the change and said in surprise, Master, didn't you say that this is a treasure of heaven's will and has the magical ability to transform at will? If it's limited to one, wouldn't this treasure be damaged for no reason? Aunt May blushed slightly and murmured, Your master was too surprised just now. This lotus leaf is indeed a treasure of heaven's will, but it's only a secondary leaf. It should be one of the leaves of Yun Yang's natal treasure, so its effect is slightly impaired. It can't change infinitely, so it can only change once. After that, it can't transform anymore. Still, this is rare enough because the effect won't be reduced after the transformation. It's still a rare treasure that's hard to come by. Shangguan Lingxiu bit her lip, unable to make up her mind. Chapter 8:17. Shangguan Lingxiu thought about it for a long time and said, Master, I still want to turn it into a sword. Yin Yang's future path is bound to be difficult and filled with obstacles. I can't only think about protecting myself. I hope to face all the obstacles and setbacks in the future with him. When facing any obstacles, I hope that I can use the sword in my hand to cleave them apart for him, so that he can move forward unhindered. Ha 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 ha. A maniacal laughter rang out before a voice spoke, Shui Yan, what do you think? You're a woman, but you still don't understand women well enough. I've long guessed that this girl would choose a weapon. Do you concede? A man in white appeared amidst the laughter. The newcomer had 3 long strands of beard that floated all the way to his belly button. His white hair made him look rather old, but his eyes were still clear as if they could see through everything. He had the demeanor of a sage, ethereal and otherworldly. One look at him would evoke a sense of reverence. Such a person was like a deity among immortals. He was extraordinary. Shangguan Lingxiu was awed by this person's demeanor as well. She was immediately filled with respect and realized that this person must be the Grand Master that her master had mentioned. Her master was already so impressive, the Grand Master would probably be even better. Unexpectedly, Aunt May's eyes widened when she saw the person before her. She did not know whether to laugh or cry. You. What are you doing? How did you turn yourself into such a ghastly state? Are you trying to scare me? The newcomer stroked his long beard with his hand. He had an unfathomable and admirable demeanor. He squinted his eyes and said disdainfully, "Since I've become a grandmaster, of course, I can't be the same as before. At least in front of this girl, I have to maintain a steady and calm image. Isn't this reasonable? How did it become frightening?" Aunt May covered her face, speechless. "Based on what you've just said, which one of them is steady and calm? You're not frightening now, but you still don't have a shred of your image." "You're right. It's not easy for our family to take in a disciple. Our priority now is to send out the invitation and hold the ceremony." The man in white stroked his beard, squinted his eyes, and said, "Let those guys rush over to congratulate and give gifts, isn't it?" Aunt May was at a loss for words. She knew that her husband's image had crumbled yet again. His worldview had been shattered, and his moral integrity had been destroyed. "Xiao Miao, Xiao Yi, come. Hurry up and get ready. I'll give you a name list. Hurry up and write the invitations." The man in white counted on his fingers. "Then, Ling Tian Palace should send 50 of them. As long as they are in there, make sure everyone has one. Also, Old Black should send, is 200 enough?" Thinking, he turned around and asked Aunt May, "How many wives does Blackie have?" Aunt May was speechless. She said angrily, "You want all of his wives to send a congratulatory gift? Don't you have any shame? Even if you're shameless, us sisters are." The man in white was furious when he heard that. He said angrily, "Who is the shameless one? Which of his wives didn't send an invitation card when they gave birth? Of course, we have to take back all of our disciples. Damn it, the biggest loss I've suffered in this life is marrying too few wives. It's a huge loss." The woman in white glared at him and smiled faintly. "Too few wives? From what you've said, it seems like you've been speaking from your heart for a long time." The man in white's expression changed. He laughed and said proudly, "Although they are few, they are of high quality. They are many times better than his ordinary women. They can completely crush him. I've always been satisfied with this." An unprecedented storm was instantly annihilated into nothingness. No matter how strong an expert was, no matter how capable an almighty being was, a woman was still a woman. Eternal love for beauty, and receiving the heartfelt praise of her man, any level of turmoil could instantly be suppressed by 80 to 90%. Oh yes, on the other side, send a few dozen invitations to the dozen people there. Distribute them according to their names. Speaking up to this point, he suddenly thought of something and said, "Oh yes, don't send that narcissist. He definitely won't come. Also, Fraud Tian, make it clear that our disciple is his daughter-in-law. Let him think about it. Don't think about taking advantage of him all the time. Also, send it to Xiao Xiao as well. Confirm that it has been sent. Also, we have to send it anyway. Everything has to be confirmed." The man in white roared into the sky excitedly, "Let me send one too this time." The corners of Shangguan Lingxiu's lips twitched. She felt that this grand master of hers was strange no matter how she looked at him. It was so different from her first impression. Could it be that one really could not judge a book by its cover? The woman in white said, "Are you sure you want to send it to Old Black as well?" The man in white thought about it and said, "Your concern is reasonable. We won't send it to Old Black, lest we alarm the evil. You people are all full of evil tricks. You're just the eldest brother talking about the second brother. Do you really think you're a good person?" A few women's voices chuckled at the same time. Shangguan Lingxiu was bewildered, not knowing what was happening before her. He could clearly understand every single word, but when he carefully pondered over the true meaning of every single word, he could not understand the specific meaning at all. However, Shangguan Lingxiu was shocked to find herself drowning in all sorts of gifts. It was just a grand master, a few mistresses, and her own master's greeting gifts, but it was already a dazzling array of gifts. Shangguan Lingxiu looked at each of the items she had received and thought subconsciously, how good would it be if I could go back now? How much effort can I save if I give these to Yunyang? Shangguan Lingxiu had already left, her silhouette nowhere to be seen. Everyone in the Shangguan family was filled with melancholy. Old Mistress Shangguan was the only one who seemed to have let go of a burden as she sighed softly. It was just that there was an additional sense of longing, her expression filled with worry. Yunyang, don't let Lingxiu down when the time comes, the old mistress told Yunyang seriously. Yunyang nodded heavily. Don't worry, old mistress. Yunyang promises you here that I'll never let Lingxiu down. Old Mistress Shangguan smiled faintly and looked at Yunyang lovingly, saying softly, if you and Lingxiu get married one day, don't forget to offer a pot of wine to this old one's grave. This old one will be comforted to know it in the afterlife. Yunyang took a deep breath and said, old mistress is healthy. You'll definitely be able to see that day. Even if you have grandchildren around your knees, it won't be wishful thinking. Old Mistress Shangguan smiled and said, I hope so, Honorable Yun. She then said in a low voice, Supreme Cloud, you must be careful when you go to Tianxian Cliff. If you're not completely confident, don't force yourself. You can plan for the long term. There's plenty of time in the future, there's no need to rush. Yes, Yunyang understands the crux of the matter, Yunyang replied. The old mistress sighed and said, actually, the 9 Supremes matter is Yutong's entire empire's matter. However, you've brought it into the martial world alone and forcefully severed it from the empire's destiny. Your intention is good. However, to shoulder the world's troubles alone and shoulder the empire's subsequent troubles, it's too tiring. Yunyang sighed again. Old Mistress Shangguan was indeed someone who had been in charge of the Shangguan family for so many years. With just a single glance, he had seen through all of his thoughts. Chapter 8:18. In the palace. His Majesty the Emperor had locked himself in the royal study. What he held in his hand was the will of the eldest prince, Supreme Earth. He had read Supreme Earth's will over and over again. He could already recite every word and punctuation mark in it fluently. However, he could not bear to put it down. He wanted to read it again and again. It was as if he could feel that his son was still alive and still by his side as long as he stayed like this. The Emperor's tears flowed endlessly, sobbing soundlessly. The ground beneath his feet was already soaked. His eyes were swollen like peaches. His body continued to tremble and only calmed down after a long while. He heaved a soft sigh of relief and passed down the imperial edict, summoning Qiu Jianhan, Fang Qingtian, and Leng Daoyin into the palace for a discussion. Supreme Cloud has challenged the Four Seasons Tower to Tianxian Cliff. What do you think about this? Feel free to speak your mind if you have any suggestions. In spite of this, the 3 old sirs were silent. What do we think? What can we think? The Emperor looked solemn as he said seriously, Supreme Cloud is an important official of the Empire, the spiritual leader of Yutong, the guardian of the nation. All this while, he has fought for the Empire, his meritorious service is unparalleled. He has given so much for the Empire and now, he is willing to draw the enemy out of the country for the sake of the Empire. For the Empire, he is willing to bear endless grievances to separate himself from the possible political whirlpool. Everything is for the stability of the Empire, for Yutong's future. To this day, can we only watch as Supreme Cloud continues to bear so many burdens alone? Can we sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor with a clear conscience? His Majesty asked sharply, are you just going to watch Supreme Cloud fight for the country? How can we bear to do so? How can we feel at ease? The Four Seasons Tower has never been Supreme Cloud's only enemy, it's the entire empire of Yutong's enemy. The Emperor said angrily, at this moment, Us old fellows already know what many people in the Empire of Yutong have done in the previous battle at Tianshan Cliff. Then, can we put in some effort and do something in this battle at Tianshan Cliff? Old Marshal Chiu and the others grew quieter in response to His Majesty's question, but they were still speechless. What can we do about the battle at Tianshan Cliff? Honestly, we want to do a lot, even if it means sacrificing our lives, as long as we can be of some help to Supreme Cloud. However, no matter how unwilling she was, no matter how guilty she felt, there was nothing she could do. Any reckless move now would be an overestimation of one's own capabilities. It would only be futile and even self-destructive. It would be fine if it was only a waste of effort or harm to oneself, but perhaps Supreme Cloud would be implicated because of his reckless move in trying to save those who had overestimated themselves. It would instead be a great burden, dragging others and himself down. Your Majesty, the Empire doesn't have the manpower to intervene in this war at all. Not only will it be futile to force it, but it will also become a burden to both the Empire and the Empire. Qiu Jianhan heaved a long sigh. His Majesty closed his eyes, almost suffocating from the words. My command. The Emperor said emotionlessly with his eyes closed, Fu Baogua, come out of the Fortress of Resilience and await orders. Pay close attention to Tianshan Cliff. Assist Supreme Cloud at any time. If Supreme Cloud is in danger, even if the 400,000 troops on the eastern border are all killed, Supreme Cloud's safety must be guaranteed. Fang Qingtian was shocked. Your Majesty, calm down. Don't act impulsively. I am very calm now. This is a decision made after careful consideration. The Emperor said softly, I must do something. Otherwise, how can I feel at ease? Leng Daoyin and the other two generals sighed simultaneously, knowing that His Majesty had made up his mind and could not be shaken. Although the three of them felt that this was foolish, irrational, and even illogical, and that it would not benefit the Empire at all. In fact, it might even harm the Empire's plans to unify the Empire. However, surprisingly, everyone felt a sense of comfort and warmth in their hearts. Following such an emperor, no matter what the outcome was, it was worth it. No matter what, he could see everyone's contribution and sacrifice, and he responded equally. That in itself was already very enough. At the same time, investigate in secret. His Majesty said, I remember that when Supreme Cloud snuck into Zio for a massacre, he was acquainted with Jun Moyan, the unrivaled swordsman in the world. We will do everything possible to find Jun Moyan. I hope that he can lend Supreme Cloud a hand in this battle. No matter what condition he has, he can agree to it immediately, including the western border troops' withdrawal from Zio. Your Majesty, how can this be? The western border troop has won a great victory, and the complete annihilation of Zio is a foregone conclusion. There's only a little time left. How can we give Zio a chance to breathe now? This cannot be done. Why can't it be done? If we can ensure that Supreme Cloud can retreat unscathed, so what if Zio isn't destroyed for now? The Empire of Zio is now at its last breath, struggling at death's door. If this can be exchanged for Supreme Cloud's life, it should be done. You are right, Your Majesty. We will do it immediately. Let's leave it at that for now. The Emperor waved his hand tiredly and seemed to recall something, saying, mobilize the people to write a memorial for Supreme Cloud and the 9 Supremes, erect a monument in Tiantang Square. Confer Supreme Cloud as the nation's protector. For generations to come, as long as Yutong's bloodline still rules the world, all major ceremonies and national providence offerings shall be worshipped to Supreme Cloud first, then the ancestors. The 3 elders trembled abruptly. This was too heavy a burden. With this, there was no doubt that Supreme Cloud was already above the imperial authority. However, it was obvious that the Emperor thought it was not enough as he added, from now on, Supreme Cloud is a living saint in Yutong. From today onwards, he shall be worshipped by the people and enjoy Yutong's providence. At this time, Yin Yang and Ji Lingxi had already left Tiantang City and were walking towards the south gate. Bai Yishu and Feng Mafei stood at the city gate, sending them off with their heads raised. Reluctance was written all over their faces. All of you have your own paths. Work hard to move forward, don't be negligent. If all of you continue to follow me, you'll lose yourselves and become my henchmen, my subordinates. This is an outcome I don't wish to see. I hope that each of you is an individual that exists independently, that each of you has your own glory. Each of you can become a hero. I see all of you as my friends and brothers. These 3 rings, one for each of you. Lao Mei will have the last one. After we part ways today, perhaps I'll come back. Perhaps, I'll leave right away. If there's a chance, let us meet again in the bound of universe. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.